Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Public Safety Committee meeting. Please note that for the record, Alderman Arnett and did I say the Public Safety Committee meeting? I'm sorry. This is a joint meeting, but we are opening with the Rules Committee meeting. I'd like to welcome Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage. I assume everybody else will be welcomed once we have the joint meeting.
Good afternoon.
Oh.
Good afternoon. No, I'm in a little meeting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Pendel-Charles.
Good afternoon. At this time, we will be opening the Standing Committee of the Public Safety Committee. At this time, it is 4:13 p.m. on Monday, April the 5th. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. Roll call. Alderman Payon.
Here.
Alderman Gay.
Here, present.
And yours truly, Alderwoman Pendel-Charles. At this time, we would make a motion to approve the agenda with any changes to the agenda at this time. Alderman Gay?
Yes, I'd like to make, gosh, I'm blanking. We ain't been in the meeting in a while. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to include discussion for 04-21.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yes.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Raise your hand by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. The ayes have it. So the ID 6721 will be amended to include a discussion on 04-21. All right. At this time, I will call business before the committee. Presentations, ID 67-21, discussion of 04-21, legislation presentation, entrepreneur opportunities in emerging markets, cannabis legalization, Professor Chad Ewart, Community College of Anne Arundel County. All right, Professor Ewart, I see you're here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And
all right.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shad Ewart.
Good afternoon.
I'm a professor at Anne Arundel Community College. I teach in the business discipline, and I hope to provide some information, act as a resource, and answer some questions for you. Since 2015, I have taught a 3-credit course about the entrepreneurial opportunities created by the legalization of medical cannabis in Maryland. I have studied the regulations of Maryland as well as all the other states that have legalized medical cannabis. I've analyzed the impact of cannabis facilities on the local economy, and I have examined at least two dispensary owners here in Anne Arundel County to assess.
Professor Ewart, you went frozen a bit. Can you back up to your last 2 sentences? We didn't hear them. You went frozen a bit.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me back up to, I have studied the regulations. I have analyzed the impact of facilities on their local community and the economy. And I have also been working closely with 2 of the owners here in Anne Arundel County and to determine what their interactions are like with the community, including their customers and their employees. The students that take my class take it for 2 reasons. Number one, they want a job in the industry. Approximately 25 of my students are currently employed in the medical cannabis industry, most of them here in the state of Maryland. The second reason they take my class is because they would like to start a business in this industry. You got to realize that this is the most regulated industry in the United States. There is nothing like this. Because of that, I put the opportunities into two categories. And I try to explain this by using the analogy of the gold rush. I call it the green rush. And in the gold rush, the people that made the money were not the people that found the gold nuggets. They were the people that sold the picks and shovels. Now, I do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, because and what I equate to the gold or the green rush is that licensed opportunities in this industry. So that would be the licensed cultivators like Forward Grow located in Anne Arundel County, the licensed processors, and the licensed dispensaries, all right? Those are the licensed portion of this industry, and that's what I equate to the gold or the green nugget. I believe, and for most of my students that attend Anne Arundel Community College, they don't have the economic wherewithal to open up a cultivation center, which on average, most folks needed to have $20 to $25 million in the bank. Most of them don't also have the economic wherewithal to open a processing plant or a dispensary, which requires about $1 to $2 million in the bank. People cannot access the banking system because cannabis is still a Schedule I narcotic in the United States. So what we have are islands of legality in a sea of illegality. The sea of illegality being the federal government, the islands of legality being each one of the individual states that have legalized. So again, back to my analogy, the gold rush and the picks and shovels, the license opportunities are the nuggets, but I believe the other ancillary opportunities are really where the business support comes, and that is construction trade, business services, and all the other inventory items that would appear in a regular dispensary. I want to just conclude here my little presentation by talking about what I see as some of the general or longer term benefits to having cannabis facilities in one's area, and then some shorter term, more specific benefits that we have seen specifically here in Anne Arundel County. So first of all, cannabis industry has become an economic engine for the United States. For every job that has been created in a specific licensed facility, we see a multiplier effect of about 3.1 to 1. So for every job created there at the dispensary, 3.1 other jobs are created outside of the dispensary. This is held true for all states, and part of this is because the stringent regulations that are required to open these facilities, they force these license owners to comply to those regulations. And many of those regulations, such, for example, in the area of security, creates opportunity for firms that are in the security business. I think the second benefit of the cannabis industry in one's neighborhood is that it does help address past inequities in this industry. Like all other industries, like the same reasons why people of color have a hard time finding housing or getting good rents or getting a job or getting a promotion, those types of injustices exist in this industry as well. It is not immune to that. In fact, what we do know about cannabis usage is it's absolutely equal across races, across economic strata, absolutely even. However, in the United States, if you are a young Black male, you have a 4-time higher chance of getting arrested for cannabis usage, even though your usage is equal to all others. By creating these businesses, and because the state of Maryland is setting aside, or not setting aside, but allowing regulations that will promote people of color into this industry, this is one way that we can address to some of these past inequities. Thirdly, there is a harm reduction aspect to cannabis. Cannabis is not a cure for opioid addiction. Cannabis will not get you off opioids, but these are the facts. Wherever cannabis access has been increased, so that means either medical or medical plus recreational, we have seen a reduced rate in opioid use and abuse, reduced opioid hospitalizations, reduced opioid traffic fatalities, reduced opioid drug treatment admissions, and reduced opioid-related overdose deaths. That is the definition of harm reduction, and that has been seen in every single state that has legalized cannabis. The other thing that is interesting, even though the data is still quite new, is that in any state that has legalized first medically, and then the typical pattern is about 4 to 5 years later to legalize it for recreational or adult use, there has been an almost instantaneous drop off in teenage cannabis use. The data is still very early on this, but it does appear to be holding true. And then finally, let me just conclude with some fairly specific short-term benefits here. The dispensaries that have opened up in Anne Arundel County have provided long-term employment, good hourly wages for part-timers, and good opportunities for promotion and for full-time employment as well. I have a number of students that are now employed full-time and make much more money than their professor does at Anne Arundel Community College. It is a tremendous source of pride, but a point that my wife seems to keep making as well. The other point I'd like to make is that in terms of the specific dispensaries I've worked with, and let me name them, that would be Mana Supply over in Edgewater, and Tony and Laura Toskoff's Greenpoint Wellness up in Linthicum, and now their second facility in Laurel, Maryland. They have been tremendous citizens. They offer good jobs. They practice diversity, equity, and inclusivity in their hiring practices. They're compassionate people, and they're community focused. Let me just conclude with one small story about both of their dispensaries. Both of them realized that most of their customers are north of 70. So what they noticed was that a lot of times you would see the car drive up, someone gets out of the driver's side, they go to the trunk, they get the wheelchair out, they go to the passenger side, and then help the spouse get into the store. So what Laura and Tony did was they bought a bunch of wheelchairs, they monitor the parking lot, and when they see this, they send the employee out there to help their customers out. What Chris Jensen's done over at Mana Supply, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see this, but that is an old bank, and you may have noticed the big box that comes down over the cars. And that is because the regulations say that you must be inside to conduct the transaction. He has done this for one reason. He knows that those elderly patients have a difficult time to get into the store. So they can pull up, the box comes down, and they're technically in the store. I point that out as simply, number one, it makes my heart feel good as a business professor to know that they recognize their target market and they are serving that target market. These are not efficient things for them to do from a business standpoint, but this is something that they do because I believe they are good citizens. So at this point, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Well, I'm not sure how we're going to do this, but I saw Alderman Savage's hand go up first, I believe, even though Alderman Gay is our host, or at least the person who invited the guest. So if you don't mind, Alderman Savage, I'd like to ask Alderman Gay if he could answer his question first, or ask his question first.
Thank you very much, Alderwoman Finlayson, and Alderman Savage as well. And thank you, Professor Ewer, for coming and speaking to the Public Safety and Rules and City Government Committees. I just thought it was important that we have someone who's an expert in this space come and share information with us. And I'm glad that you accepted the invitation and did so. So just to point back at a couple of points made, would you expand on, because one of the main factors and motives in proposing this legislation is that our city has seen 120% opioid overdose increase since the start of the pandemic in March of last year. And so, as you've noted, medical marijuana is not a solvent for an opioid addiction. You don't smoke weed or rub it, in a cream and bam, you're no longer addicted to opioids. However, it provides alternative resources, and those numbers, if you could, again, maybe share some of the details as it relates to the drop in opioid addictions in areas where communities have access to cannabis.
Well, that is exactly what it is. Once they do have access, people tend to choose cannabis as opposed to opioids. And since the number of overdose deaths, we have been using cannabis, we as the human population, for 5,000 years. It was first used by the Chinese in 2737. We love them because they write everything down and they equate it to like some comet, so we know the exact day and everything of that. So for 5,000 years, this was a medicine. All right, it's only been in the last 100 or so years that the plant has been demonized for a variety of reasons. But in those 5,000 years of medical usage, there are 0 overdose deaths to this point. So it is simply a less harmful thing to be addicted to. Don't get me wrong, cannabis is addictive. Cannabis is addictive at a rate of about 9%. Alcohol is addictive at a rate of about 11%. Caffeine's addictive for them to be. And I mean, part of it is also it isn't being driven by the recovery industry, but it has been driven by the addicts themselves. They choose cannabis when they have that option, as opposed to when they don't have the option and they only choose opioids.
Thank you very much for that. And I just have one last question, tying two pieces together, I guess, because you spoke about the drop in usage amongst teens when cannabis dispensaries became legal in particular areas. So could you expand on that? And I just blinked on the other part that I was trying to tie into that. But expand on, the use amongst, because I think there is, again, a misunderstanding in recreational usage of marijuana and the medical usage. And so medical cannabis is not accessible to anyone under the age of 21, correct? Without an ID.
You would have to have a caregiver. Medical cannabis can be given to those under the age of 21, but you would have to go through a caregiver. That individual could not access it through the dispensary themselves. And what I know about the teenage drug use, like I said, this data is very new, but what we've seen is that there has been a drop in teenage, not drug use, teenage cannabis usage when cannabis becomes legal in a state. And a couple of factors are probably being involved in this. Number one, there is an age limit. The age restriction is 21 in every state, so they have a more difficult time getting access to it. There are fairly serious rules against diverting, which would mean somebody buying it and then providing it to somebody else. And anecdotally, we have heard what was known as the grandmother effect. And the grandmother effect is if grandma's going into a dispensary, maybe it's not so cool for a teenager. And I'm not sure about that. That is something that has simply been written about. But what in cannabis usage when you have medical and recreational cannabis.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Professor, for joining us today, and thank you to Alderman Gay for inviting him. And I think this is absolutely one of the things I wanted to hear at some point regarding this legislation, to have somebody to talk to. So, a few questions for you, Professor. So, even though I see you're a business law professor, but it sounds like you've looked into some of the health policy aspects a bit.
Yes.
And I think one of my questions has to do with, because some of the research I've done seems to say that some of the early research in some of the initial states looked very promising, but that some of the most recent research and longer they've been doing this and looking at this in some of the states, it's a little more, it's not quite as clear in terms of establishing trends. But again, I fully admit I wasn't able to do a completely exhaustive search on this, but if you have any additional information or research you can provide us with, I think, on that aspect, because I think obviously part of the justification for this legislation and increasing access is for the potential health benefits, but I wasn't quite clear on if that was confirmed or not.
Well, listen, I mean, the reality is that we don't have really good data because we simply don't have the time. California was the first to legalize in '96, and that was, we don't really even count that. We really kind of look at Colorado in 2014 and then their movement to recreational 2 years later in 2016. So that you're right, that the data is very thin at best. And for somebody that's in an industry where we like to have like long-term data going over, yes, I get very nervous about it as well. So yes, take everything with a grain of salt in this industry at this point in time. But I will share as much as I can, and I will send everything through Alderman Gay.
Okay, yeah. If you have anything that helped lead you to the conclusion that this has been showing at least general trends of going in a positive direction and being a positive influence on the opioid epidemic would certainly be helpful.
Sure.
But in terms of just business questions,
sure.
So one of the things that is being considered is, and I think it's something in the current law, I think the state law, is limiting the number of businesses in terms of how many of these dispensaries can be located in one area. And one of the amendments being considered is to limit the number of dispensaries per square mile, essentially. So I'm kind of curious from a business perspective, is there generally a problem with that? Like, do we see with the dispensaries, are we seeing a high amount of demand from the limited dispensaries? Do we have data to really look at in terms of the demand from existing dispensaries, and is there a risk of increasing the number of dispensaries too much? And I guess I have a number of questions in here. Like, would a restriction impact these businesses if we were to put a restriction in terms of no more than 2 square miles or near each other, that kind of thing?
The restrictions that are going to restrict the number of dispensaries, I mean, you can probably do whatever you need to do, but the restriction comes from the regulations themselves. Dispensaries we cannot have any new dispensaries right now. The dispensary process is through the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. The MMCC is the main regulatory body. And the way dispensaries and processing plants and cultivation sites are distributed is through a process of application. All right. Folks have to, the commission comes out and says, we need this many more dispensaries. We're going to now open this up for application. There are no open dispensaries at this time. There is no need for any additional dispensaries. So until the state decides to go to adopt legislation for recreational or adult use cannabis, you won't see any more dispensaries. Then once that process is open, all right, then it is for the people to apply that will select where they want to put their dispensary. So they're smart business folks. They're not going to overload an area. I mean, they're not silly. They're going to keep. So I don't ever see a situation. First of all, that would be 10 years down the road where you might see multiple dispensaries within a mile of each other. That's just my prediction at this point. You have 88 functional dispensaries right now. If they legalize next year, it'll take them 18 months to roll it out. They'll roll it out on the back of the infrastructure that they have now. But that puts us 2.5, 3 years down the road there. And the application process generally has taken about a year as well. But it will be the individual entrepreneurs if they decide to choose downtown Annapolis as their site. And they may or may not. There are some things obviously that are attractive about downtown Annapolis that are attractive for the 5 ice cream stores that are on Main Street. And there is good pedestrian traffic, and that's what they might be looking for. But there's also a cost. Downtown Annapolis is a pricey place. So, yeah. And because of the other regulations in terms of some of the internal structures that have to be built, they have to build a vault room. A vault room this is where the inventory is kept at night. It's basically you have to build a little building inside of a building because the little building inside of the building can't share any walls with the real building there. So it is so restrictive that, it'll be up to them whether they make that choice. But
Okay.
You may want to build in whatever restrictions you have in terms of, within a certain number of miles or blocks of each other. But I think the entrepreneurs are smart enough to understand, okay, here's where the dispensaries are now. Where are the open spots for us?
So it sounds like unless they have cannabis ice cream, we'll be okay in terms of density.
Well, but then again, those are the businesses that may benefit most from this.
Yeah, sure. Well, my question, now would be, so are you saying that even if we were to pass this or something that says you can put a dispensary anywhere you want in the city, that determination is not up to us? You're saying that the total number in the state is controlled by the state. Is that right?
By the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. And they have no intent at this point in time to add any more dispensaries as long as they are in the medical only phase. If they do legalize, they will need to add dispensaries, or the current dispensary owners are extremely happy right now because the market is almost doubled. It's gone from 26 million in 320 a month to 48 million in 321. Just last month's data had come out. So they want to keep it as is, I would think.
Okay. Well, I guess before I have a question for the sponsor, but before I ask that, I guess another question for you, Professor. Have you come across any kind of research or data regarding potential impacts, crime impacts, in terms of, if there's an increase in crime around dispensaries or any other kind of neighborhood impacts, anything you're aware of? Because I tried to look for that, but I couldn't quite find too much.
Yeah, I actually did look some stuff up, and I found out that there was, and the best data I found was coming out of Detroit, Michigan. Michigan is a very unique state in that they have a very similar system to what we have here in Maryland, but they've also set up a system to address some of these racial inequities and social injustice, and set up some smaller type versions of dispensaries and grow facilities, kind of more like a mom and pop type shop. Think of a coffee shop maybe, or actually they're more akin to a brew pub, where a brew pub can brew its beer right there and can only sell it right there. They have these small grow facilities where you can't sell through a dispensary. You can only sell it there in-house. And they have found actually that there has been a 6 to 8% drop, no increase in crime, and a slight drop, and property values have gone up 6 to 8%. So no impact on crime. Again, limited data though. And we have not seen this here at all in Maryland. The part of those regulations are the fact that Tony Toskoff can look into his parking lot all the time on a camera is because the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission requires that every square inch of his facility, including the parking lot, be under video camera. So when you have that many video cameras out and people know it, criminals don't make a lot of smart decisions, but if they're going to make one smart one, the one would be avoid this place because everything is recorded.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. It's been very helpful. My final question, just for the co-sponsor or the sponsor, would be, I'm just struggling with the need to do this. If we can't change the density, that's up to the state. Are you planning for just anticipating in the future for when they're going to be potentially increasing, the allowed density? Because it sounds like this isn't going to accomplish your goal potentially.
I think it will, and it is all about future and prioritizing and making sure that the city of Annapolis can be in a good place when it is legalized. Obviously, if you follow some of the cannabis conversations and NORML and all of that stuff, and following David Moon's legislation, many of us thought that it would be legalized this year. Obviously, they've taken the steps. I think it will be decriminalized now up to a pound, I believe, is an amendment that's moving. I'm not sure where it is now. Last I checked, it was moving pretty successfully out of committees. And so Maryland is moving into a place where we are accepting marijuana use. And I think, as the professor mentioned, by next year, it will be legalized recreationally. As he also mentioned, that takes 18 months to roll out, as we just seen when New Jersey passed their legislation. Even though they just passed that legislation, and so did New York City, even though they just passed that legislation, that doesn't mean that dispensaries are open automatically. They still have to go through a process, as he mentioned, through the commission. And so, Madam Chair, I've had some presentation points that I wanted to make if we are moving into that phase of this conversation of discussion in 0421, because I just wanted to kind of point out some items. If that was, I'm not sure where we are. If there are more questions for the professor, I'll wait there.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
First of all, I think there's a question about whether our committee is actually addressing 0421 or whether we are simply responding to Professor Ewart's presentation. And I guess that's my decision to make. So let's ask Alderman Arnett to ask his question, and then I'll come back to you, Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow on with a question that Alderman Savage made, but first I want to thank the professor and Alderman Gay. It's always nice to have information before you make a decision, but maybe not convenient, but it's nice to have information. If this legislation is really in anticipation of legalizing recreational use, then I would submit the legislation fails because it's adding to the use table medical cannabis dispensary. And if we're really trying to anticipate a use table that allows dispensing of cannabis writ large, we're going to have to come back and do this again. And so I guess the question that I would ask, aside from, and I see Alderman Gay has a response, and I knew he would because he's on top of it. But I think the question is really to Alderwoman Pendle Charles, because you and I and others attended the Planning Commission meeting the other night, and I know from discussions from you and hearing from people from Greater Parole, a lot of unease, and we've certainly seen a lot of public comments. Is the unease about medical cannabis, or is it about the prospects that it's going to be legalizing recreational, in which case that's an issue for down the road? And again, this legislation doesn't speak to that. But I would ask, it seems to me that Rob and Dwan both have made the point that, and the professor certainly, it's not us who have a choice. We can put it in the use table, but where they actually go is still up to the state of Maryland and that commission. So I can see doing this legislation. It's the reason why I haven't had an objection to the legislation. If it's legal and the state is controlling where it goes, it's really out of our hands. If, Rhonda, it is the next step that is the thing that we're worrying about, I would submit that that discussion should come when we come back to a use table that allows dispensaries for recreational use. And there may be an entirely different attitude on the council about that. I will just say, on a personal note, my next door neighbor died of lung cancer, and towards the end of his life, he was a big user of cannabis, and it really did ease his way. So, and I have used the ointment on my knee. I think Alderwoman Finlayson, you have too. Now you can get that online, so this legislation doesn't really speak to that. But there are truly medicinal aspects to it. And I would look forward to seeing stronger information if moving to cannabis and away from opioids is really a legitimate trend. I favor that. Last time I smoked any weed was while I was in college, and that's 50 years ago. So, it's long in my past. But and I didn't particularly enjoy it. I felt that I didn't want to be in La La Land. I'd much rather be doing my homework.
You didn't inhale. We understand.
Yeah, right. But so I think I would, when we get to discussing the legislation itself, I would question whether we need it other than to make sure it's in the use table if Maryland decides we get another medical dispensary. If this is sufficient, if we're really moving towards recreational. And then I think the big question for the professor is, and I remember a very tough undergraduate course I had in the theory of location. If it is for recreational use, are we going to see one on every street corner? Or is it still going to be relatively rare? The city is 7.5 square miles. How many of these can you successfully put in as a business enterprise to serve the 40,000 people of the city of Annapolis in 7.5 square miles? So that's an empirical business question to ask you, Professor Igor.
Okay, and a great question. And let me, well, first of all, again, understand that the state will not tell them where they put it, but the state just simply allows people to apply for a license, and through that application of a license, they may choose, downtown Annapolis. There would be, but the state also does not want, in a lot of ways, they act a lot like your McDonald's. McDonald's does not want one McDonald's to cannibalize the sales of another McDonald's there. So they're not going to put that in a situation like that. Now, what you may want to do is look at some different cities and how they have addressed this. Denver is a very interesting place in that Denver decided they wanted to put all their cannabis dispensaries in one spot. So they literally have an area they called the Green Mile, and there are no dispensaries any other places. They are all concentrated right there. In all the other places, though, they have allowed, again, the dispensary entrepreneurs that successfully get the license to make the choices as to where they're going to locate. And then they sometimes run into problems of not being able to find properties that they can lease. So in the case of both Chris Jensen over there at Mana Supply and Tony Toskoff at Greenpoint Wellness, they ended up buying the building itself. That was not their plan. They did not want to do that. They were simply forced into it by that situation. So there's a lot of factors that would go into that location analysis. But listen, you can have 5 ice cream places down on Main Street, Annapolis. You don't need 5 dispensaries in the city of Annapolis. It's just not necessary.
Alderman Gay, before I go to you, I think you might be a great transition between the two committees. But I do have a couple of questions. Professor Ewert,
yes.
One of the concerns I've heard is the fact that marijuana is a gateway drug. Can you speak to that for us, please?
We have a college up in Baltimore called Johns Hopkins. I actually have a packet of paper here that shows about 4 different studies that show cannabis is not a gateway drug to harder drugs. Actually, the one thing that we have shown that is probably a gateway drug to the use of heroin is sugar. If you have if you're squirreling away a bunch of peeps right now, you might have more of a chance of becoming a heroin. I don't mean to be. It's one of the many things that we deal with a lot of misinformation in the cannabis industry, and that's that's the reason I literally carry around a packet of paper that has 5 studies on it, so I can just simply hand it to people, as opposed to no, it's not a gateway drug. No, so no, that has actually been proven not to be true. It is not a gateway drug to harder drugs.
So when Fred hands out his chocolates at the meetings, he's giving us the gateway drug.
There you go. Yes, indeed.
I was just waiting for one wise guy to come up with a comment like that.
He's changing to gummy bears, I understand.
No. The Easter Bunny was good to me, so he'll be good to my colleagues.
Great, thank you. Professor Ewert, and this is for everyone's benefit, I received several phone calls today from residents of my ward indicating that they had received a postcard. And because there's no mailer on the back, I assume these were hand delivered to people's doorsteps. And on this postcard, it suggests that 0421 would allow medical cannabis dispensaries throughout the city in the same locations as traditional drugstores. I would like for you, Professor, and you, Alderman Gay, to dispense, and my name as well as my phone number and the mayor's name and phone number are on these cards. And I don't know whether you've experienced this in other wards with your names on them, but could you dispense with the misinformation that is being promulgated about this?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Alderman Gay.
Yeah, and so I think this is a great segue because a lot of the questions, excuse me, as soon as you asked that, I ate a Lifesaver. 1 second. A lot of the questions that you guys are asking are circulated around how many dispensaries can be in a city or how many dispensaries can be, around us. By Maryland state law, you're only allowed 2 cannabis dispensaries per senatorial district anyway, right now, as it stands. And so going into this, I knew that it would be completely restrictive. But again, I would like to position us in a place so that if they do legalize next year, as the alderman mentioned, Alderman Arnett, why not put recreational into this? Because it is illegal right now. And so I figured we passed the legislation as it relates to medical cannabis. Well, I shouldn't say we passed, because we're, debating it now. We hear this legislation as it relates to medical cannabis dispensaries. And if it is legalized recreationally, then we go back and simply amend the legislation to include the use of recreational dispensaries. With that being said, the state, as the professor mentioned, does not dictate where an individual dispensary can go. Those are left up to localities. If you look at Chapter 106227, licensed dispensary premises in the state code, you'll get a plethora of information. And I've attached this in an email to my colleagues as it relates to how dispensaries are to be created or how the process to apply for one, or what it is. And you'll also see, as he mentioned, the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission link as well. But the state leaves it to the localities. Julian, if you could pull up really quickly, because this now phases us into 0421, if you could pull up the attachment that I linked, distances from homes and schools. Thank you very much. So this is for a screen grab of Bill 719 from the Anne Arundel County Council Code. It was introduced and passed on 4/1/2019. And so, as I mentioned, the states leave it up to the localities to decide distances dispensaries could be, or whatever. So we don't have to follow Anne Arundel County's rules, but I'm showing you this as an example because just because Anne Arundel County has it this way, we could, and I'm just saying we could have it that all of our dispensaries have to be on the same block because we don't want any traffic of weed outside. I'm just using that as an example. But, here's how Anne Arundel County has done it. And this is as it relates to distance from schools and everything. All right. And so one of the important things and I think this would help with the concern of dispensaries within the certain distance of one another. 500 feet in a straight line from a lot line of a lot located in a residential district that contains a dwelling unit. So this is creating a distance and 700 feet of residential zone property. This is creating a distance from homes and residential communities. So basically what they're saying is that we don't want the dispensaries to be at the front of someone's house or to be at the back of someone's house. So it's not intruding on residential neighborhoods. And then again, for the safety and concern of children, the county included it cannot be within 700 feet in a straight line from a lot line of public or private school. And so I pulled this and I extend the invitation to you guys to look at additional research for yourselves. But what most municipalities and states have done as it relates to dispensary distance is like we see here. An example is create distances from schools and residential communities to not create clusters of dispensaries. No state, and I've looked, and no municipality has where you can't have a dispensary within miles of one another, mostly due to the size of cities or due to the size of municipalities. It would, kill the opportunity to bring those dispensaries to communities or to cities. And so what we have proposed in the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is obviously still deliberating. They'll have their report out soon. But for members that did not have a chance to attend, the main focus was making sure that we could not create a cluster within the third ward of the city and easing some of the concerns that the residents had there. And so I thought what would be a decent proposal, and obviously you can hear from our colleague as well of what their thoughts are, that we include similar amendments as what we see here, verbiage like this, but additionally add religious institutions, because I think that would, calm the nerves of some individuals. And it would also then create a greater difficulty for clustering in the city of Annapolis. Think about how many churches we have. And if we created an amendment that says, a dispensary can't be within 750 to 1,000 feet from a church. These are ways that we can go about making it so that we are still inviting and accepting the business, but creating, obstacles for, again, what we're calling clustering, as some other communities and cities had. Julian, if you could also pull up the patient provider caregiver data link. And I sent this to you all as well in an email. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's the one underneath of patient provider caregiver data. And as the professor mentioned, caregivers are required to give medical cannabis to students and things like that. Anne Arundel County actually has a 26-page instruction sheet on the use of medical cannabis in schools, where nurses are now being certified to give students medical cannabis throughout the day, if so needed. And so I just wanted to show you guys again some facts, and then obviously another other quick sheet, and then we'll continue to have discussion. This is a list of certified patients that have their actual medical cannabis ID. And so, Julian, if you could scroll down actually you don't have to, I'll just pull it up here so I can see the actual listing. That was as of 1/28/21. There are about 125,335 certified patients. As of 1/25/21, there are about 2,090 certified providers. A good majority of are in the city of Annapolis. If you look at the list on the Medical Cannabis Commission's webpage, they have the list of actual providers. And a number of the physicians are in the city of Annapolis. And then here, the registered caregivers list, which is about 7,817. Julian, I just wanted to pull up the next one, which was dispensary sales. And I'm trying to get through this quickly, just again, so my colleagues could answer questions at the end. And again, as the professor mentioned previously, this is as of January the 21st. January of this year. Over $46 million in profits. And I've reached out to the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, and I've got a meeting scheduled with them tomorrow. Because I want to understand, get a better understanding of this $46 million, how much of that is going back to the individual communities that actually have dispensaries in their cities. Because again, when I pitched this to you guys, I said, look at the economics of it and what it could bring to the city. As mentioned, jobs are a big portion of that. And Julian, if you could go to the other links, I just wanted to bring up, this again is just supporting data to the point made earlier by the professor. Percentage of students who currently use those ones, those two attachments. I just wanted to bring up quick data. This is from the, I want to give you the right, 2016 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It was the most recent one I could find. But just pulling up facts as it relates to use of drugs and marijuana as it relates to teens in our communities. And so this is the percentage of students who currently use. Okay, so let me pull that up. So again here, the percentage of students who currently use is broken down into ages here. 15 or younger, about 1,300 kids. 16 to 17, about 1,300. And 18 or older, about 136, in total 2,782. This is in the school system. And obviously this is an anonymous test, so fewer results. But I just wanted to, again, just give you guys a brief snapshot of some of the data collected so you can get a better understanding of what's taking place in the school system and how drugs are used in our communities, because I knew that was a concern. I like the aldermen have last smoked in college. That was not 50 years ago. It was about 2.5 years ago, a little more recent. But I don't think that there are detrimental long-term effects, bottom line. And so I now would open it up to questions to my colleagues and also turn it over to the public safety chair as well.
If I can just add one real quick thing here about, so where is that? So there's actually, Alderman Gay, there's even newer data there on sales data, and it's up to 48 million now in March 21. None of that is going back to the municipalities at this time. Right now, no sales, because it is medical, it is not taxed. Any taxing will occur when it's recreational. And that's when the spigot will be turned on in terms of the money flow. And that is where I believe it is absolutely critical that all the counties and municipalities get involved in that, because they will determine where that money's going to go, and you want to get your piece. But right now, the fees that are paid, so the licensed operators, they pay fees. Those fees go to the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission to run the commission. They now have full-time employees, they have inspectors, they have an entire staff now. But so it's only until you have recreational or adult use that you will see tax revenue flowing to you. But that's a point where, as I tell my students, get involved in the regulations. That will affect your opportunities, and it will affect yours as well. Those things will change.
There seems to be a little lull. May I ask another question of the professor? The mailer that I mentioned previously speaks to normal drugstores being dispensaries. Is there something in the state law that prohibits our CVS or our Walgreens from getting into this business?
Absolutely, 100%. It must be a separate standalone business. Those businesses cannot sell cannabis in any way whatsoever. They can sell CBD, but then again, so can your gas station. And that is completely unregulated, and that is absolutely the Wild West. But no, Rite Aid, Walgreens, Walmart, no pharmacy will be selling cannabis in the state of Maryland as the regulations are today.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pendle-Charles, turning it over to public safety.
Righty. Thank you, Alderwoman, Chairwoman Finlayson. I have a question. I'll start with Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Professor Ewart, for your presentation. From your experience with the dispensaries and the owners that you've worked with, could you briefly explain the permitting process that they went through and the interface with legislative officials?
Yeah, it's a cumbersome process, and actually one of my complaints about the process is how cumbersome it is. Like I said, it is through an application. One of the smart things that Maryland did was that some of the other states allowed people just to, as the applicant said, we blew them away with paper. Some of them delivered their application in 10, 12, 14 hammer mill boxes, and just yeah, exactly. As a guy that doesn't like reading a 3-page paper, I don't need 14 hammer mill boxes of reports and stuff like that. Maryland did have a word limit. It was actually a series of questions, and I believe they're still available on the MMCC's website, so you can take a look at those. But they actually included a word limit to the questions. But, and here's where my issue was, on average, at least to the folks that I talked to that applied for dispensary licenses, it cost them on average, and there was about a $4,000 or $5,000 fee to apply. I'm not talking about the fee. The cost to put together the application was somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000, and the maximum amount was $225,000 that I heard. For the grow facilities, the application, it was even more extensive. It was even more extensive. So that's a tremendous hurdle to this industry, the fact that most folks can't even put the application together because they don't have the economic wherewithal. Some of these larger organizations, they would hire attorneys, certified public accountants to help them, as well as doctors that study in the field of cannabis to help them put together that application. So the process was really cumbersome. And then it was graded. A rubric was first used by RESI. RESI is an acronym that I can't recall what it means, but they work out of Towson University. And what they do is that they do a score sheet. So let's say you were going to build a bridge and you had 3 construction companies that put a bid on the bridge. RESI would do that as well. So they use their skills to evaluate the applications. There was a second round of applications that just concluded about a year ago. And because there was some internal conflicts with some folks at RESI, Towson University, and people that were applying, it went to Morgan State. And Morgan State is now doing the evaluations. If there is another round, I'm not sure who they will use to score the applications that time. But again, there is nothing in the works right now.
So as a follow-up, do you know if any of those applicants, did they require code changes at that time to accommodate their location?
I cannot tell you if it was a code change. I do know that some of them required zoning changes, and I'm not sure if that's consent. You're above.
That's what I mean, zoning change. Yeah, at that time.
And some of them, and actually, so Alderman Gay is absolutely correct. It was 2 dispensaries per senatorial districts. And I believe we would have maxed out at around, I believe there's 52 senatorial districts in Maryland. Don't quote me on that. We're somewhere around that number. And the growers were allowed to apply to vertically integrate, so they could have applied for their own applications. But you only have 88 that are open right now. And the ones so that means that people got the license, went through that entire process, and in some cases 3-4 years ago, and have still not been able to get to the start line. And the primary problem that we hear is they can't get the zoning in their area to work for them. I believe some counties have been very amenable to cannabis companies, and there are some counties that have put up obstacles to them. So those dispensary owners, they did the work, they got the license, but they still haven't opened the doors yet. So that is a difficult part of the process. But I do know that zoning was an issue there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Alderman Gay, do you have another question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Because both the professor and Alderwoman Tierney brought up another very good point. And as he was talking about, it's almost like wealth discriminatory practices as it relates to trying to open a facility. One of the things that I plan to be an advocate for, if this legislation passes, but if recreational use passes and the city it takes that on, the city of Oakland, when they passed the dispensary, when they legalized dispensary usage in the city, they put in place a moratorium on issuing licenses. And for the first year, I believe, or 18 months, what they did was allowed 2 co-ops to be formed of former nonviolent drug offenders who had previously been incarcerated or served time for some drug related crime or something like that, and they were able to open the first 2 dispensaries in the city. And I think those are the steps that we can take as an individual municipality to level the playing fields in our communities to make sure that the right people are getting involved in this business and being able to access some of that capital, because I think that too is what's important.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before I get started? Okay, thank you very much, Professor. I'll start off my questions and my comments with, first of all, indicating I was not aware, Alderwoman Finlayson, about some mailers. Never heard about it, never seen it. I haven't gotten anything. I haven't heard anything about it, so I don't know where it came from. The other thing is, too, Professor, I have several questions for you, sir. And first of all, I'll preface it with, don't take this as any kind of disparagement. Let's start with that. First of all, okay, you have been a professor and administrator at Anne Arundel Community College since 2001. Is that correct?
Since 1997.
Okay, according to this department chair, Professor, World Cannabis Conference and Expo paper that came out, that's what it says. Prior to that, you were a professor of business at Mount Vernon College in Washington, D.C. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
Okay, and Mount Vernon Seminary and College was a private women's college in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to read a couple of sentences from the Wikipedia page. Let me know if any of this is incorrect. Mount Vernon College was founded in 1875, but its roots trace back to 1868. By 1905, the school had boasted a rigorous academic curriculum. In 1923, under her leadership, Ms. Summers, the school established a junior college as a separate unit. Mount Vernon Seminary and junior college operated together, but with a clear distinction between the two, the 4-year preparatory school and the 2-year junior college section. The school applied for accreditation, began awarding the Associates of Arts degree in 1944 to junior college graduates. During the 1960s, the seminary remained one of the most academically rigorous private secondary institutions in the nation and drew record numbers of students from around the country, graduating the largest classes in the seminary history. The seminary class was graduated in 1969. By 1973, in order to meet the contemporary needs of women, the school began awarding the Bachelor of Arts degree, followed by Business Administration. In 1976, Mount Vernon College became an accredited four-year college. In 1997, the Board of Trustees decided that the college would close as an independent institution and then move to George Washington University. Some notable alumni include Khadija Al-Salami, Barbara Allen, Nasruddin Ansari, Susan Elizabeth Ford, Marjorie Merriwell Post, Charlie C. Canty, Courtney Cox, Ada Comstock, Frances Dodge, Eleanor Lansing Dulles, Dorothy Pratt, Ann Hurst, Philippi Malmgren, Evelyn Walsh McLean, Heather Narsett, Sally Levitas, and Barbara Ingalls Shute. I may not travel in those circles because none of those names are familiar, but obviously they're familiar to this college. Also, Professor, is it true also based on the information that I gathered from the World Medical Cannabis Conference, quote, Professor Ewart has also been responsible for the design and developments of the first course to explore the entrepreneurial opportunities created by the legalization of cannabis for medical use in the state of Maryland. A number of students who have successfully completed the course have already found employment in the industry, have started their own businesses, and in one case, own a dispensary. Professor Ewart is currently developing the first college credit program for those interested in entry-level jobs in the cannabis industry. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct. And that one student that they referred to would be Laura Toskoff. She was in my very first class, and her husband, Tony Toskoff, and her own Greenpoint Wellness.
Okay. And is that the place in Linthicum?
That they have one facility in Linthicum and one in Laurel that just opened up.
Okay. Also, according to the Campus Current, September 26, 2019, headlines, cannabis certification no-go for now, indicated that Vice President for Learning Mike Gavin halted the certificate, claiming it could jeopardize federal financial aid for AACC students. Professor Ewart, who proposed the stalled AACC certificate, noted his plan was to offer 5 classes to train students for entry-level positions in the medical cannabis industry, while University of Maryland at Baltimore's program focuses on higher level positions. Professor said graduates of UMB's program would apply for jobs as master horticulturists at grown facilities. Professor Ewart's former student supported the proposed AACC certificate. Former student Kai Hoffman noted the range of opportunities for those going into the medical marijuana field. Quote, you don't have to be growing the pot to make money, he said. You could be in security, IT, inventory tracking. You could be in clothing design. There's tons of opportunities. Mr. Gavin stated that the certificate would not move forward until the federal government legalizes medical marijuana. Is that correct, sir?
The fact that it will not move forward is correct. They were incorrect in thinking that the federal government would either pull funding or take away loans from the college. That has not happened, and there are over 60 colleges in the United States that have cannabis programs now.
Thank you, sir. Now, Professor Ewart, do you know why exactly you were asked to appear before us today?
I assume in support of Alderman Gay's ordinance that he has proposed, but I think also just because I happen to know a lot about this industry and that you guys are simply want to get some facts here. I live in the District of Columbia, so this doesn't, I don't have as much skin in the game as you do. So my purpose would be primarily to be just a source of information. You know, if people are passing out cards like this, that is such horrible misinformation, and what a horrific way to you know, especially to put somebody's phone number on that how intrusive that would be. No, I take the quote from one of the owners here in Maryland. His name is Mackie Barch, and he is one of the few owners that is vertically integrated. So he owns the grow facility, he owns the processing, and he owns the dispensary. His dispensary is up in Baltimore City. It is called Culta. And what Mackie said once was, and this was during actually it was during the process of trying to determine that curriculum. And he said, when you get into this industry, whether you like it or not, you become an ambassador for this industry. So one of the things that I kind of giggle about as I listen here to this meeting here is that in my class, you're not allowed to use the word marijuana. Marijuana is a made-up word. That word was made up in the latter part of the 19th century to demonize people of color. It sounded Hispanic. My students are not allowed to use the words weed or pot. We use the word cannabis. That is the legal terminology. I actually tell my students, and I'm living it right now, that, we have to look the part. And a lot of people in my class, they like cannabis. They like the opportunity for whatever reason it is. But I tell them we are not at a place like this. We are still at a place where people are making up cards to intimidate people with misinformation. And therefore, when we address each other, we must use the right words. We must dress the part. And I even tell folks, listen, get your hair cut. No, I don't think it's fair that you have to do that. Yes, I think you should be able to express yourself any way that you want on this world. But if you're in this industry, you got to say the right words. You got to look the right way, and you can't act like a fool, because you are going to feed a stereotype that exists out there.
Professor, you need to chastise one of your students, because in this article, Kai Hoffman used the word pot.
He did.
Anyway, moving on. Did you know that for me and my residents, this discussion today is not about the medicinal purposes and or advantages of medical cannabis? Were you aware of that, sir?
I'm absolutely aware of it. It's always part of the discussion of cannabis.
Are you familiar with the legislation, Ordinance 0421, and the staff report that was prepared?
I have the legislation in front of me. I do not know what the staff report is.
Well, let me read you the staff report, sir. According to the staff report on the proposed legislation, the City Director of Planning and Zoning writes, this legislation allows the use of medical cannabis dispensaries throughout the city in the same locations as traditional drugstores, which are a part of the category called personal care establishments. This new use would be a permitted use in all commercial, industrial, and mixed-use districts except for C2P. In the P district, the use is a special exception use. A medical cannabis dispensary is defined as an entity licensed under the Maryland Code, Health General Article, Title 13, Subtitle 33, that acquires, possesses, processes, transfers, transports, sells, distributes, dispensaries, or administers cannabis products containing cannabis, related supplies, related products containing cannabis, including food, tinctures, aerosols, oils, or ointments, or educational materials for use by a qualifying patient or caregiver. So the staff report indicates that it would allow medical cannabis dispensaries in the same location as traditional drugstores. So are you telling us today, Professor, that is not the case?
Well, that cannot be the case. If they
let me finish. I let everybody speak, so let me finish, please. Professor, can you answer that? Hold your questions till
I call the question.
Can you hold your question? Can you hold your question? Alderman Gay, I was very respectful of everyone for an entire hour. Now, please let me continue and hold that question. I know you won't forget it. You got a young mind. Go ahead, Professor Ewart, please answer the question.
They would not be able to if they follow Health General Article Title 13, Subtitle 33. That does not allow them to open up in a pharmacy, a Walgreens, or anything like that. So whatever the legislation says, it is still determined by the regulations of the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. So it cannot open up in those facilities. It would not be allowed by the state of Maryland.
Professor, have you seen a map of Annapolis as it relates to where the dispensary should be located?
I have not. I know where they are.
Julian, Mr. Jock, can you bring up that map for me, please?
It's coming up.
Thank you. Mr. Jack, this is a map of our city, and it outlines the wards in red. If you take a look at the blue colors here, as you can see, I think you're aware, as you can see, Ward 3 is overly impacted by any of these dispensaries. Can you see that, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. So are you aware that a large number of my residents and others, when looking at this map, are vehemently opposed to and are extremely angry about any dispensaries established in Ward 3 and other folks as well, for a variety of reasons? As they see it, bringing about a low and negative quality of life, especially to Ward 3. Can you see that, sir?
Absolutely. And I can see exactly why they would be afraid of that, especially if they thought that they would come to anywhere in that blue area that had a Walgreens or a Rite Aid or something like that. Again, that's misinformation. It cannot go into those facilities. So this simply would have to educate them about where a possible dispensary may end up. But absolutely, I see totally that they would be fearful of it.
Those blue spaces are not Walgreens and CVS. We have one Walgreens, but the blue spaces are commercial and industrial zoning, which would allow that to be. So what you're saying, in my estimation, is correct. Sir, so in light of my residents and others being adamant against any dispensaries, as a professor, what do you think about this staff report, specifically as its location in Annapolis, in the context of, as you said again in the article, you are responsible for the design and development of the first course to explore the entrepreneur opportunities created by legalization of cannabis for medical use in the state of Maryland. And a number of students who have successfully completed the course have already found employment in the industry, have started their own business, and in one case own a dispensary, as you indicated, in Linthicum, and that you are currently developing the first college credit program for those interested in entry-level jobs in the cannabis industry, unquote. So what do you think about the location of dispensaries in the city of Annapolis, especially in Ward 3? And I think you've indicated that you are concerned and you can understand why we're fearful. Because Ward 3 has quite a bit of commercial industrial zoning, and it would be a prime location for dispensaries, would you be interested in helping to establish dispensaries in Ward 3, especially since I've outlined to you today how many of my residents feel about it?
Objection, Your Honor.
Professor Ewart, what do you think? Did you want me to repeat the question?
Please repeat the question.
Because Ward 3 has quite a bit of commercial and industrial and mixed zoning, and it would be a prime location for dispensaries, would you be interested in helping to establish dispensaries in Ward 3, especially since I've outlined to you today how many of my residents feel about it?
I would not be allowed to do that, ma'am. I am a District of Columbia resident, and any application for a license for any future dispensaries, if they do become open, would have to be by a Maryland resident.
Would you be able to do it in your capacity as a professor and helping students? As you indicated, you have been very instrumental in students opening cannabis dispensaries, if no more than from your professorial occupation.
If they have the dream of opening a dispensary and there are legal dispensaries that can be opened, I would help them with that application, absolutely. Whether they would choose Ward 3 or those areas in the blue would depend on many, many other factors. And I'm not yet, and I don't have enough data to say, would that be the location that they would choose?
But that seems like a very likely location since it's all basically blue in Ward 3. Is that correct, based on your data, your professional experience, your expertise in this area? Would that be the most likely place to go?
I would actually think the most likely place to go would be somewhere on Route 2, more in the center part of the county.
That is Route 2.
Oh, that is Route 2?
That is part of Route 2. That's part of Route 2. It's very proximity wise to Route 2, sir. That's where Ward 3 is.
It's not on Route 2. It's 450.
I said I said it's in proximity, very close proximity to Route 2. The Hudson Street corridor, as well as the Moreland Parkway and Gibraltar corridor, are less than a half a mile from Route 2.
No, I would think that the Route 2 I was referring to would be more in the Severna Park area. I believe that's an area that doesn't have a dispensary and would benefit from one. And, you know, listen, pedestrian traffic is nice, but they need vehicular traffic. And one of the problems of coming down into the city of Annapolis is finding parking. So I think if I was a dispensary owner looking for a site, I would want to make sure I had adequate parking and an adequate parking lot. And I'm not sure that would be available within the city or Ward 3.
Yes, sir, it is. If you're not familiar with Ward 3, we do have plenty of parking there. So would that make us more vulnerable?
It would make you more attractive, but I can't speak for anyone specifically whether they would choose that area.
Okay. Professor, we have received many letters and correspondence against the dispensary legislation, and the letters and correspondence are being entered into evidence in this proceeding and have already been introduced at our city's planning commission meeting last week. I'm going to read a few, but before I do, Alderman Payon had his hand raised, and then Alderman Gay as well.
Yeah, I had it. I've had it up almost.
He has had it raised for the past 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Alderman Payon and then Alderman Gay, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure, Professor, I don't know about our chair, but I wanted to thank you for coming in and sharing the information. I haven't decided how I'm voting on this, but you are providing information that we have otherwise not had. You should not be subjected to cross-examination like you're an expert witness in court being paid for your testimony. I assume that, knowing Alderman Gay quite well, that he's probably not paying you to come in here and testify. And
as
I just wanted to let you know that the overwhelming majority of us that are listening are very grateful for your coming in. We may or may not agree with some of the things that you've said. I don't know, but I think it's believe me, our chair is my colleague, and much more importantly, she is my friend. But I really object to the way, the tone of this. I'm a retired prosecutor. One of the things I did while I blocked myself out here, is that I called some colleagues of mine in the state's attorney's office.
Stop it, Dad. I'll get it.
To ask them about an increase in crime around the West Street facility. And I called both the head of felony screening and the district court people who would handle misdemeanors, possession of marijuana, possession of any drug, that sort of thing. And they both agreed that they wouldn't even know it was there, professionally speaking. They have had no problems. Neither one could remember a single case that had ever come out of that area. The area and around that, not just in the facility, not just in the parking lot, but in that general area, cases that were a result of, in that area at least, that were a result of the cannabis or CDB distribution facility being there. And again, I don't know how I'm going to go on this, but I, for one, wanted to thank you for your patience. Your answers were good. They may or may not have been to the chairman's satisfaction. I don't know, but you did a great job in attempting to answer the questions that you were asked pretty darn well under the circumstances. And thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And like I said, as an ambassador in the cannabis industry, we can handle the heat.
We seldom get this kind of information ahead of time. Sometimes we get this kind of information after we voted, but ahead of time in preparation. in preparation and in education before we vote. I mean, I may ultimately, my vote may not reflect what you've said. I don't know. I may be on the chairman's side, but I'm very grateful you've come down and given a point of view that we could only get from somebody similar to you. Your qualifications are very, very strong to be able to give that opinion, and thank you.
Welcome.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles, I'm going to adjourn the Rules and City Government Committee. Thank you for allowing us to join you. Professor, thank you. We truly appreciate all that you've given us this afternoon, and we may be calling on you if there's additional information that's needed. But I want to just say thank you on behalf of the Rules Committee. Thank you, Alderman Gay, for setting this up for us and providing us with this abundance of information. We appreciate it. And Ms. Green, I'm going to adjourn.
DC statehood, DC statehood.
I need a motion to adjourn the Rules and City Government.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Arnett, second by Alderman Savage. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you
one.
all.
Thank you all.
Professor, can you hang in there for a few more minutes with us, please?
Sure, I can.
Thank you. Thank you. The other thing I want to say, and I'm not disagreeing with Alderman Payon, I thanked you ahead of time, sir. And the one difference that I have here is I have a certain constituency that I'm representing. That constituency lives very close to Gold Leaf. Unless you live in that area, you really don't know what's going on a day-to-day basis. I live there, of course. I have to. We all have to live in our wards. I receive complaints and problems about certain things, whether it's on that parking lot or not. And we'll get to that in a minute. Now, I'm a retired prosecutor out of Baltimore City, just like Alderman Payon is one in Anne Arundel County. But my job is to make sure I elicit the information. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I have like I said, I'm not going to disparage you, but Alderman Payon knows anytime you have someone to bring information, there may be some what we call cross-examination. In your line of work, there shouldn't be any question I ask you that you can't answer or be totally candid with. So with that being said, Alderman Gay, do you have a question or comment?
I'm just going to dismiss my guest because I think some of the questions, he's not a resident of the city of Annapolis. He didn't introduce the legislation. So as it relates to, inquiries regarding the verbiage and things, he can't answer that. And so in particularly with the personal care and stuff, even in the way the staff report is written, it is not saying that the dispensaries can go in personal care establishments. It's saying dispensaries can be built in areas that are zoned for personal care establishment, meaning that if there's a vacant lot and I could build a Walgreens there, that would give me the eligibility to build a dispensary there. Not meaning that if there is a Walgreens, I can walk in and partner with the Walgreens and sell cannabis out of the Walgreens. So there's just some interpretations of the staff report even. And I just don't think that's not for the professor to discuss. That's up to us as the body.
Well, I had a question, and that was my question. Now, if the staff report needs to be amended or changed or edited, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just asking the professor a question based on some earlier testimony that he gave about drugstores. But anyway, Professor, if you would like to leave, and the only one thing I'm gonna read one thing to you, and if you want to leave after that, certainly feel free to do so. This is a letter from the Greater Parole Community Association Incorporated. It is our premier organization within Ward 3, and it extends even beyond that. This is a letter that they wrote April 1st, 2021 to the mayor, members of the council, the Annapolis Planning Commission, and their chair and members, entitled Oppose 0421 Medical Cannabis Dispensaries. And the Greater Parole Community Association has approximately 484 members. And we call it the GPCA. GPCA's mission is preserving our past, promoting our present, and protecting our future. We strongly oppose the legislation before you, 0421 medical cannabis, for the reasons listed below. Ward 3 will be disproportionately affected by this legislation. It is highly probable that more medical marijuana dispensaries could be located in our immediate area, affecting the quality of life, crime, and property values. Many of our members have shared their concerns and noted opposition with yours truly, Alderwoman Pendel Charles. There's a dispensary in Ward 3 that causes the community a great deal of concern. The local merchants and residents have complained about the lack of parking and patrons of the dispensary consuming the products in the parking lot, and this is Gold Leaf. GPC has learned that many medical marijuana dispensaries are unable to participate in regular banking activities and frequently have large amounts of cash. This becomes another source of potential crime, a reason why dispensaries have private security. Again, GPCA strongly opposes this legislation. If you'd like to comment on that, sir, if not, I certainly respect you from the time you walked into the door until the time that you leave.
I will comment, and then I'm going to say goodbye. I think my dinner is ready here. So let me comment. I think I would say in addressing that letter, in addressing the Parole Business Association, or I would say, number one, we don't know if you're going to be disproportionately affected. We do know that in some cases, like in the Detroit case that I mentioned before, that property values actually went up 6 to 8% when dispensaries came to their, when access to dispensaries came to their areas, and that we don't see any increase in crime. The second point about Gold Leaf. All right. My grandma always said to not say anything if I don't know anything nice to say about somebody. I can say this.
Okay.
The students of mine that go to work for Greenpoint Wellness and for Mana Supply, they have been there for years. They stay there a long time. The students of mine that go to work at Gold Leaf don't stay very long. They have a lot of turnover. I don't know the owners of Gold Leaf. I have reached out to them. They don't reach out to me. They don't seem to need me. Therefore, I cannot comment about anything else about Gold Leaf. And then finally, the sources of cash. That problem is mostly resolved now. Most of the companies now have a way in which they can take a credit card and they can take a debit card. So they are less and less of them are relying on having those big bundles of cash, which would increase, obviously, the risk. To me, my great concern is that in some of those cases, it puts the risk onto the employees because in some cases, the employer cannot pay with a paycheck. They have to pay their employees cash. And that's just transferring the risk to the employee because the employee, well, first of all, it's inconvenient. You know, people don't use cash anymore. And it transfers the risk to the employee who has to walk out of the facility with a big envelope full of cash. So absolutely concerns of mine. And I would say, if you'd like me to come back and answer more questions, I'm going to provide Alderman Gay with some information on opioids and cannabis. And I'm also going to provide him with some of those the papers that I mentioned about the cannabis being a gateway drug. But if you'd like me to come back and answer more questions, I would be more than happy to. And the difficulty of the questions is fine with me. I can handle them. So,
Professor, two comments I want to make. Number one, parole is a traditionally African-American community, now with a significant Latino population. So 2/3 of what we're talking about disproportionality, we are, as you can see, I'm African-American, and I've been there all my life, and my family's been there since the Civil War. And that goes for a lot of families. So we understand what you're talking about. The other thing I want to mention is, in any situation, laws can change. The state laws can change. The county laws can change. We have no control over that. Once legislation is in place, we have no control in changing. Tomorrow, the cannabis industry could go before the legislature and in a matter of moments or days or weeks or even a year can change things that would dramatically change the way we do business here in Ward 3. So I just want to bring that to your attention. You don't have a crystal ball, none of us do as well. So we're at the mercy of the state and the county, especially Ward 3, where we bump right up against the county jurisdictionally. But I'm gonna let you eat your dinner. I have not had lunch today, just some cereal and a banana. But we thank you so much again for coming. And Godspeed to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Take care. Alderman Gay, do you have a question or a comment?
So I guess we're just, wrapping up, conversation. Because I guess we were getting into the concerns that you had about 0420. And so what we discussed at the Planning Commission, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I plan to introduce a resolution. I'm sorry, I said a resolution, an amendment with the verbiage displayed earlier, using the county's, hold on one second. I'm just trying to pull it up. Okay, here we go. Using Bill 719 with the 750 feet from residential zone property, 500 feet in a straight line from the lot of a located residential district, 750 feet in a straight line from a public or private school, and then I'm adding 750 feet from a religious institution. That's the amendment that I plan to put together and bring forward after the Planning Commission, sends us their report.
I would suggest to you, Alderman Gay, that you meet with the Greater Parole Community Association and pose that to them as soon as possible. When can you meet with them?
I don't know. And to be honest, I don't think that I have to meet with the Greater Parole Association.
You don't have to. No, you don't. You absolutely you don't.
I'm taking into great concern. I've read every single letter that they've sent, and what I'm putting together is stronger than the state and the county, and so it would meet the needs that you have. It would literally, from every church in Parole, there'd be 1,000 feet, as the Planning Commission displayed that line. There'd be 1,000 feet distance in place. So there can't be. I mean, it would effectively shut down the entire West Street corridor. Think of the Monarch Academy, Mills Parole Elementary School, and the number of churches that are there. It would completely put a lock on it. It would solve the problem that you have, or that Ward 3 has.
I would say to you, Alderman Gay, I'll tell you this, from a personal standpoint, if I was introducing legislation or an amendment that overwhelmingly impacted Ward 6, and you asked me to come to any community association meetings that you could name because your residents were concerned, especially one organization that had close to 500 members, I would do it out of no more than respect for you as the alderperson for that ward. I think I owe you that much.
Okay.
I'm speaking personally.
Yeah.
I'm speaking personally.
And I respect that.
I wouldn't have to do it. No, I wouldn't have to do it. But out of respect for you as the alderman for Ward 6, if you asked me to come to speak to every community organization that you had in your ward concerning something that overwhelmingly impacted them, I would do it and have no problem with doing it and would have already done it.
I will look at it. I've read the letters. I'm seeing the flyers and all of this stuff. And it's just like, is it even worth? I mean, they don't want it. I get that. You've made that very, very clear and have done a great job.
Why do you think I'm opposing it? If they don't want it and we're talking about these amount of people, why would I ignore them? You wouldn't ignore Ward 6 if it's something they didn't want.
Yeah, but I also wouldn't. See, I also, if there was a concern in Ward 6 and my constituents were saying no, okay, for example, if my constituents are the ones saying they didn't want a medical marijuana dispensary, I would write to my constituents, while I understand your concerns, the overwhelming majority of the city and council would like to move forward with this process. We can't stop the project. I mean, but what we can do
The
is
city doesn't elect me. The city doesn't elect me, Alderman Gay. Ward 3 elects me. I listen to what they have to say and make my own best judgment. I do that. I've been here 66 years.
And
I make my own best judgment.
And I think that you can go back and tell them, or I can write an email to them, I can tell them. You can send them an email. You can tell them. You can send them an email. I can tell them. I can send them an email. It won't matter. Yeah, but that's the point, though. I'm not
elected by the city, Alderman Gay. I'm elected by the residents of Ward 3. I have to listen to them. Now, I can take and look at the entire city and the impact, no doubt about it. But when it comes right down to it, because we live where we live, no one understands Ward 6, Ward 5, whatever the ward is. Nobody understands the impact of something unless they actually live in that community. It's easy for anyone to talk about it,
but even professional experts have debunked every single theory that they've put forward, that the GPA. They've sent emails saying that there's an issue with crime. Fred just got off the phone with top officials from the state prosecutor's office. They said they can't even remember.
Do they live here?
Just one second.
Do they live here?
Fred went through. They can't remember a single.
Here?
They can't remember.
Do they live in Ward 3? Do they live in Ward 3? You show me somebody on the people that he called that live in Ward 3.
Prosecutor's office lie and say that no crime is taking place.
I didn't say they were lying. And I'm not saying there haven't been any kind of violations or laws or anyone arrested. I'm not saying that. I trust Alderman Payon, what he told us. No doubt about it. All I'm saying is, do any of those people live in Ward 3? If they live in Ward 3, I want to talk to them.
I'm just saying that I think that just to calm some of the public and, just all of the concerns have been, quelled. The issue with smoking outside of that's so illegal. And as mentioned, the facilities are required to meet a certain standards of security by the state. And so the likelihood that I can't imagine the likelihood of someone leaving a dispensary and rolling up and smoking right in front of the dispensary is slim to none. I mean, that's like,
well then not only is what Chairman Sales said next week. He's not telling the truth either, because he said he smells it. Did you hear him say that? Chairman Sales said he goes out there 2 to 3 times a week and he smells it. Is he telling the truth?
I don't remember him saying that at all. But I'll just say this.
He said it several times.
I'll just say this. The Maryland Cannabis Commission has inspectors for that reason. And so, again, the likelihood that you are walking up and down West Street and smelling bundles of marijuana is slim to none. Bundles of cannabis is slim to none.
Talk to Chairman Sale. He said it several times.
Again, I think the proposed amendment, as I mentioned, would meet the needs of Ward 3, understanding that there is no chance that medical marijuana dispensaries would be prohibited in the city of Annapolis. So doing what is best, we've put together, strong amendments to help with the concern that Ward 3 has. Effectively prohibiting dispensaries from Ward 3 based off of the requirements of the dispensaries. So I think that the issue is fixed. And so I would hope that we could just find some way to agree on this amendment. Just understanding that it's the best we could do.
I would like for you to meet with GPCA, and maybe you can have a better success with them than I have, since it's your amendment. I've discussed with them my amendment. Why don't you discuss with them your amendment?
Okay.
I'll say this, Alderman Gay. This is the best conversation we've had. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed our conversation. It's been very pleasant. I really have, and I will say that publicly. I respect you for what you're doing and how passionate you are about your subject matter. I will give you that credit, no doubt about it.
I appreciate it. And you know, like I said, I understand the concerns that the commission has. And so I got the email pulled up here, Greater Parole. What is it? Hold on. Greater Parole Association or assoc@gmail.com. I'll shoot them an email, see if we can set up a Zoom. I mean, yeah.
CC me on it.
I will. I'll actually put you in the.
CC me on it.
I think we.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very good step. And like I said, the requirements are even stronger than the state and the county. And so, you know, I think that's good.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I respect your passion. And I've said that to many, many people. And so I don't agree with you, and that doesn't matter. That's not the point. But I do respect what you're doing.
I appreciate that very much. I honestly do.
Certainly. Okay. All right. I think at this point we have continued our discussion on, let me get the number correctly here, on ID 67-21. Ms. Green, do we have to close out our portion of this joint meeting as rules did? No, we don't. Okay. So we can move on to business before our committee, which is approval of the minutes, which is PSC 03.01-21, approval of minutes for the regular meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes for our meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the March meeting.
Second.
Okay. Do I hear a second? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I don't see any nays, so approved. We'll move on to number 2, public safety spotlight. Did you know? Written reports and comments, year-to-date overdose summary, Annapolis Police Department, Annapolis Fire Department, Office of Emergency Management Department, Public Safety Chair, ID, okay, there. And then we have ID-68-21, presentation Heroes Memorial Park at Eastport, Annapolis Fire Department. Let's start with the fire department with anything that they have a spotlight or did you know, since they have ID 68-21. Is Chief Romali or Deputy Chief Spriggs available? I see Chief Romali is with us. Chief, good afternoon. Sorry for the delay.
Good afternoon.
We've had a very robust discussion.
It is, yes, it was.
And we all still love each other. That's the good part.
That's good. Healthy discussion. So
yes, it is.
The spotlight for the month, we're going to defer to Chief Simmons and Office of Emergency Management because he's going to do a joint one for Office of Emergency Management, Fire, and the Police Department, and I believe a couple other agencies in the city. So the only other thing we had is the presentation on the Heroes Memorial Park, and I didn't know if you wanted that now or if you want to wait on that.
It's your choice, Chief. Your choice.
Well, I'd like to bring Captain Dallas Lister up if we can. He should be online.
Captain Lister, are you online? Yes, I see you are.
So this project is a joint effort from the Eastport Volunteer Fire Company. Actually, the local 1926, the Annapolis professional firefighters are involved and the community is involved. And there was a plan brought forward to have a memorial park outside the Eastport station. As you know, we've been doing a lot of renovations to that station. It needed some upkeep, and that continues to move forward. But with that came this plan to maybe do a memorial out front of the station and expand the landscape. And I'll pass it on to Captain Lister here, and he can give you a little bit about the project. Cap?
Good afternoon. One of the things that we have discussed, as many of you know, I was involved with the union for a lot of years. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to try to highlight some of the heroes from our community, and as well as from the fire department and police department and things like that. And we never really got a good place or a good way of memorializing our people. And when I became the station captain at Eastport Firehouse, the plan came about with with Gary Mathis when he was the president of the company, that we maybe could bring some positive enlightenment to our members and our heroes and the people that have served the city throughout their lives and also their entire careers, and bring some positive interaction with the community itself. So we got together about 1.5 years ago, and just after the excitement of the investment that the city had made into the station with the exterior aesthetic and things like that, we decided that we should try to move forward and really, really accentuate our city and our little piece of the world that's ours. So the volunteers felt like they could be of great assistance by helping to manage a program that is basically a brick sale program where people would be able to have memorial bricks throughout our walkways and be able to remember their family members or their people that have been important to them and things of that nature. We also put the ability, we have in the design, there's a sitting wall, and we have a handful of members that have passed during their careers while working here. They've not necessarily been line of duty deaths, but they died while they have been employed as city firemen. So we've memorialized a couple of the areas under the sitting wall with little marquees with engraved pictures of the person as well as their name, so that they would kind of be like icons that would live on forever, so to speak, in our community. I kind of you guys received the written document that we put together going forward. We have the ability that there's many, many more bricks that could be sold than are needed to perform the actual cost of the production, as you guys have seen. I included the monetary part of it with that. Then as we went forward, we also have found that there was some little constraints with money as it relates to city budget. So we kind of rolled in aesthetic as well into, so we included like overhead doors and some outdoor irrigation and lighting and stuff like that, that actually just makes the front of the firehouse not only just a really cool place, but it makes it a destination for the community of Eastport at large. And with the commercial development has been occurring through that community, both in the plaza across the street and the success of VIN 909 and the new vacant lot that is zoned commercial for future commercial development, it becomes a very cool place to attract people to want to be involved with the community and the fire department, and serves a dual purpose, because then when school gets back to normal, that's one of the big stops where a lot of the kids in the neighborhood meet every morning out front. They ride their bikes together as a group up to the school. They do many things together. And so we just wanted to really embrace our community, both the commercial aspect and the residential aspect, and try to bring it together into a safe, beautiful place that people would feel very welcome and want to be involved. And the way that we felt that we could get to doing this is through this partnership with the Eastport Volunteer Fire Company. And they have been very receptive to the idea. And over the past 2 years since I've been at the Eastport station, we have really accentuated the partnership with the volunteers and the community at large. We, as you guys have seen, the new engine that the Eastport station is paid for by the volunteers, but yet they were able to maximize, and it works in the same specifications as the rest of the city fleet. We've also been able to get rescue tools that the volunteers have bought for the ladder truck. They've used 508 funds to help facilitate other responses with the ATVs and UTVs for the entire city and Anne Arundel County in particular, for the trails out in the water treatment plant area, the bike trails and things like that, where they get deployed regularly. So the partnership has continued to grow, and this is just another accentuation of how this group partnership between the volunteers and the city and the local 1926 firefighters can really come together and just make a permanent lasting mark on the city and making it a more beautiful and accentuating place to want to be, and bring a lot of positive light to the community of Eastport, which it deserves.
Yes, Alderman Gay has a question.
Thank you very much. And thank you. What's your official title?
Captain.
Captain.
Yeah, I'm the station captain for Eastport.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Captain Lister. Quick questions. It says here, roughly 40% of the bricks available for engraving would need to be sponsored to accomplish the project without any of the funding sources. What's it like a number on that? Like how many bricks would need to be sold to reach the 150,000 mark?
So if you look into the packet a little more specifically, there's the different sizes of bricks. The different sizes of bricks have different investment value or sponsorship values. Some are 500 all the way down to 150. So obviously it would need a lot more of the $150 brick participation to get, you would need almost 1,000 of those to get there. But yet if you do the $500 bricks or the 250 bricks, it goes much faster. There are also a couple of other items that aren't specifically, as you look down lower, there's specific items like flags in the flag court area and bench seats and specific gardens. So we actually have close to, we've outlined, and it's not in that presentation, but we've outlined close to $15,000 of sponsorable items throughout that layout and that landscape that would bring in a considerable amount of resource. And those would be bigger items that maybe different businesses would want to sponsor in particular, or different associations would want their name on. So, because this is a legacy item and a legacy place. And as you can see, the design that is being put forward, the cool architecture that the city has invested in with the building itself, this just blends very well into it and just makes it a focal point of the whole entire community on Bay Ridge Avenue.
Yeah, I like to walk by, like cutting through, if you walk to the shopping center, if you cut through, obviously, through East 49, that you get to see walk by. And at night it's lit up nice. And I like the additions that have been made. Two other quick questions. Geez, I just lost. Oh, okay. So are you guys expecting that a request be made in the CIP for the construction of the sidewalk on Jefferson Street?
That is the long-term plan. I've met with Donovan, and he has given me the contact person for downtown through that is responsible for sidewalks. I just haven't addressed it at this point, just because I wanted to actually figure out how funding was going to go and how sponsorship was going to go. Because if there's no interest by the community to invest into this program, then it's going to obviously just be a moot point, and there's no need to really go further. But that would be one of the requests going forward. If it isn't able to work out and brick sales go crazy, then it'll be a brick sidewalk that is paid for by the program. So it's, we'll figure it out one way or the other. If things are going well, they'll go real well. So
yeah, that's something, if necessary, I would love to sponsor and be a part of in the upcoming budget process. And I'm sure Alderman Arnett, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure he would love to be a part of it as well, seeing that it's in his ward. But to make that, sponsorship for in the CIP. And then my last question, not about this specific project, but the station in general. So the last time I was there, they were in the process of renovation. I think, there was like one bathroom. They were just starting to get everything underway. So has that been completed? And is the station running smooth? I knew there were some sewage issues and stuff. Because I'm thinking maybe is this a bundled thing in the proposed budget or something? Do they do the sidewalk and the station issues? Like what is that like?
So in the big scheme, the construction that was laid out has been completed and accomplished. There's some areas that have come short, but we are working through multiple different facets to try to find alternative funding methods and things like that. Whereas the biggest one being a sprinkler system for the system. We don't have a commercial sprinkler or fire alarm system for the building, which is kind of painful, being you are the fire department and you don't follow the code and ordinances completely that the city has. So we are in the process of working through alternative funding sources to get that covered. The building itself is actually going to be spectacular once the COVID restrictions are lifted. We have public access bathrooms now, both men's and women's, with multiple toilets in both. So that will allow for maximum accommodation of the hall for meetings and classroom and public events and things like that, whether it's a city function or the volunteers function. We've reconfigured the entire hall perspective so that it maximizes and utilizes that new front entranceway that has been built We have implemented a safe station area that's isolated and easily cleaned, which wasn't available before. And it may sound kind of benign, but like not people that are in trouble, not always taking good care of hygiene and things like that. So we needed to make a place that was perfect and safe for our members as well to be able to maximize the treatment for the citizens that need help. So we've got easily deconned equipment, easily deconned rooms, isolated rooms, to be able to accommodate those citizens now, which we never have had at any previous time. We've improved egress from the building in case of emergency. We've improved lighting. We've improved lots of things. The station in general is definitely headed in the right direction. There is definitely more work that can be done, but with any building, there's constantly going to be more work done. The big priority, again, and the chief can speak that directly, is our sprinkler concern, and then we have our bathrooms in the back, which are 1965 bathrooms that are beginning to fail. So we will try to find money and funding to address those two issues in the immediate term. Other things we can definitely attack as piecemeal as they go forward, just to make sure the building stays modern.
So I wonder if the fire department would then be eligible for the sprinkler grant funding that we have in the city. I know it was, proposed for Main Street, but I'm just wondering, what the irony? What happens if the fire department gets on fire and there's no sprinkler? So that's something to think about. But I appreciate this definitely. I think this is a great project, and I look forward to helping.
So obviously, as fire chief, I'm concerned. When we did some of the upgrades to the station, the sprinkler system was in there. There wasn't enough money in the project for that. So the city is still looking at that. We have applied for a federal grant. We're hoping that comes through for us, because we've actually had fires in that station previously. There were some electrical fires and some other issues, but there were $1 million worth of equipment, and we have people in that building 24 hours a day. So we are actively working on that. The restroom facilities, probably the next top item there is the restrooms in the back of the building. The Public Works Director and his staff are continuing to work with that. Obviously, the money for that building is the same money that's set aside for Stanton Center. The issues at the police department with the HVAC and also Pitt Moyer, but they are working hard to make that happen, and they're looking at the current funding in this budget to hopefully move it forward, because that would be a nice upgrade there, because that's the restroom you're talking about that had some of the sewer issues where the pipes are actually coming up through the floor. So that is part of it. Unfortunately, with COVID, just because of the space in the station, we had to move the living quarters into that back meeting room. So the meeting room can't be used as a meeting room right now. But once the COVID restrictions get lifted, we get more people vaccinated, and this thing continues to go on the downward spiral, we'll be able to get that open again, because that room was starting to be used by the community for some of their meetings and things. And now that we have the restrooms up front there, it has become a nice facility. Over the years, and you've heard it because you've been on the council, unfortunately, the city didn't have the funding, or it wasn't high on the priority list to put some money into the building. We have done that. We've made the facilities better for our female firefighters, because before it was bad for the female firefighters. The facilities there were not good. So we continue to make improvements to this building. This project out front for this Memorial Park is a partnership with the community, and they're hoping that most of the donations for it comes from the community. Obviously, the sidewalks are a concern, and you talked earlier about the people cutting through, where that pathway is, where it's a dirt pathway where everybody cuts through. We would like to actually have sidewalks there just to make it nicer for the community. So that station runs a lot of calls. It actually affects 4 of your wards, because they're the primary unit for 4 of your wards, which they're the primary company for not only the lower end of Eastport and then the President Street area, but they're the primary company for Main Street, because they are the closest unit there. So they're in the historic district, and it goes all the way out past Tyler Avenue out towards Georgetown, where then it gets covered by partially that ward out there, which is Alderman Savage's, gets covered by not only the Eastport station, but the Annapolis Next station that we have people in. So it's a vital station for the community. They run a lot of calls out of that station, and they do a lot. You heard him talk earlier about the UTVs. Well, we have the Waterway Park out there now, around where the city owns the water plant, and the park that's out there now. Well, along with the park that people are using it, we've had several calls back in the park where we've had to go get people out of it. And the UTVs, which are the four-wheel drive, smaller vehicles out of that Eastport station, actually go to that water park to bring those people out. It's good for quiet waters too, and parks like that. So they do a lot there, and they wear a lot of hats in that station. They also operate the fireboat, so that crew there does a lot. And the station itself we're bringing it back up to par because there's people are living in that station 24 hours a day.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Alderman Gay, did you have another question?
Yeah, just quickly. And I'm trying to stay on topic, but obviously I'm starting to think of just budget stuff. So with those little vehicles, are those they look like golf carts, right? Those things?
They are.
So when you talk about the Eastport station, because obviously when we talk about budget, we talk fire, the second largest budget and all that stuff. And so to think about the possibility of losing something like that, if it's serving the downtown area, is serving Ward 6 and 8, is it the only station that has the boats as well? Or that gets
that station runs the boat. If they're on another call, if the personnel assigned to that station, and there's 8 people in that station. So I know people see that firehouse, see all those bays there, they probably figure there's a whole lot of people in the building. But 8 people work in that station every day. And their primary staffing is for the medic unit, the engine company, and the ladder truck out of there. And then the engine company takes the boat, the ladder truck takes the UTVs. They actually get another medic unit out. If all our medic units are on calls, the truck crew gets off of that ladder truck and they take that second medic unit out of that station. And then the UTVs, depending on who's in the building, that crew would take those UTVs on the call. So it's not like they're just specifically there for one piece of equipment. And it's a wide variety of what they do out of that station.
So, but this would then, is this the busiest station? Because if the people that run the boats, the UTVs, and the fire, they're all here. Like, if there was a situation, would the people from the Forest Drive location have to come to Eastport to pick up the necessary boating equipment or whatever if the Eastport station was out on a UTV call?
So the fireboat itself is a unique position, and we only have so many operators for that. So that varies. But just to add to it, yeah, they do a lot there, but the Taylor Avenue station is our special ops station. So they do the high angle rescue. They do technical rescue work. They have a small rescue boat that can go out on the water, but that's strictly it. It's a very small boat that they can go help pull somebody out of the water for that in some of the flooded areas. So those crews over there do something that's totally different. Now, we get a call at Structure Fire in Eastport. They're all there. All the stations come to it. The Forest Drive is the busiest engine company and busiest medic unit. They run the most calls. So all of the stations are steady and busy. And it's not like anyone is better than any other. Because they're all steady. They're all doing something all day long.
And just to add to that, the Eastport station call volume is a little bit lower than the other companies, but that allows us to be able to be experts and train on these more technical things like the boating and the UTV operations, and keep those specialty services more available. Whereas if we were at the Forest Drive station, you couldn't have anything supplemental on that. Those units are constantly gone. They're constantly gone. So you can't have any special services tied to those 2 units because you would never have those specialty services available. So we've worked very, very hard to try to parallel our engine company crew and our truck company crew that they can either either company can go to the boat, either company can take the ATVs, either company can get the 5th ambulance out if we're in chaos meltdown mode in the city with ambulance calls. So we try to make those that Eastport station, we've tried to make one of those flex stations that can respond to whatever the highest priority set of emergencies that are going on at that moment in the city at that time. So it's a resource management tool that we've used to try to maximize the overall services for the citizens and bang for the buck for the citizen taxpayers. We appreciate every single dollar that those taxpayers pay, not only for salaries, but for the actual services that we're putting out there. We try to provide the absolute maximum service we can at all times.
I really, really appreciate both of those responses.
Thank you so much. You know, this brings up another point, and that we did this a couple of years when we started it, because some of my colleagues consider the fire department budget bloated. Why don't I suggest for our next meeting, and we don't have to have a joint meeting, but we can invite the rest of our colleagues to it. I think everybody needs to hear exactly what the police department does on a daily basis. What are some of the costs? We did the Price is Right thing a couple of years with Chief Stokes. I thought that was extremely helpful. But I would suggest that you spend a half hour, Chief, bringing to us the next time under Did You Know, exactly where your budget is, how do you spend the money, why do you need what you need? I think that's extremely important, because I think we lose sight sometimes of, what's really necessary. And as I say, with the police department, it's not a problem sometimes unless you're the victim of a crime. Well, it's really not a problem sometimes if you're not a victim of a fire, and how devastating that can be. We've seen it over off of Spa Road. We had one down in Robinwood, and it's affected everybody. So we need to hear that. It's like insurance. It's, we pay it month after month, year after year, and we moan and groan. But when we need to make a claim, whether it's the car insurance, the homeowner's insurance, whatever it is, we're sure glad we paid it, because the few bucks that we put out is certainly worth what we get out of it if we have to make a significant claim. And so that's how I see police and fire in many ways. It's like an insurance policy. There's a reason we have a Class 1 fire department. There's certain things you have to do to get there. And our rates are lowered as homeowners because we have a Class 1 fire department. It's the same with being a CALEA accredited in the police department. There's certain benefits we get, and we realize them when it comes up to a point at which we are so glad we did it. And sometimes we need to be reminded. We need to be reminded of why the police and the fire budgets are what they are and why we need them. Because it's that one situation, and Alderman Payon will tell you with him, it was that one situation where his life was saved by the fire department. And so, and he wouldn't be here sitting with us today.
They've been cursing themselves ever since.
For the fire department, that's a human story that we need to remember. And so next time around, Did You Know, take a half hour and explain to us some of the things that you do, and some of the innocuous things, the benign things, using Captain Lister's word, that you do that people don't see, that people don't realize unless you're the one that's receiving on the end of the receipt of the services. I can't stress it enough. We're coming up on budget season. It's extremely important. How about that?
Yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. We'll keep it pretty short and sweet, because we know during the budget process.
Don't make it short and sweet. I don't want it short and sweet.
I know during the
I want it elongated.
Okay. We will show you what's going on, what our budget looks like, and we know as the budget cycle continues to move on, that a lot of questions will come up, and we're here to answer them. We've got nothing to hide. And I can tell you that when people need to call somebody and they don't know who to call, they call the fire department. So, and we're here and we're proud to provide that service. Yep.
10,000 times. And so we need to know what each station is responsible for. I just as a short snippet, I often wondered, and I asked Chief Stokes when he was chief, why do, engines show up with ambulances? And one of the reasons, which I had not thought about, didn't have a clue, is when there's a loved one who may be involved in an accident, and the cameras show up, the face of the loved one is shown, and the family members never had a clue. So the purpose of the engine showing up is to shade or to clothe that victim, so the members of the family aren't shocked if they see it on television. Had never thought about it, didn't know that. And so that's extremely important. Nobody wants to look at the news and see a family member and had no clue. That's the purpose of having those companies show up to shield the victim. And so that was something I learned I had no clue about. So I think that was extremely important to learn. But and the Price is Right. You remember that, Chief?
Yes.
I thought that was very innovative. So I thought that was really good. But anyway, this concept of this Heroes Memorial is excellent. I don't know where you are at in the process, but had you planned on, I know we're going to need, I guess, a resolution. Will we for this? Is that in order?
I'm not sure whether that's going to be necessary or not, but we'll continue to look forward with it. We have that partnership working already with the volunteers. It's on city property, so it's not on the volunteers' property, so that there's a joint partnership there. And obviously, we'll be looking for the council's support as we continue to move forward. They're out there actively now soliciting funds, and people. There's a sign out front of the station now. We wanted to make sure that you continue. We're aware of this because the sign's out front about the project. So we hope to continue to start moving forward very quickly.
And in your portion of soliciting support, I think it would be good to have a resolution that brings it front and center and highlights to the rest of our community and to the city what we're doing. The other thing is there's a historic commission or committee that's part of city government. We got what 25 commissions or whatever. I think it would be nice just as a courtesy to bring it to them, because this is something you want to make it a focal point. Like you said, Captain Lister, you want people to visit it. You want children, because we had pop-up camps a couple years ago in the summer. This is a great pop-up camp opportunity to explain to children why you have it. And so in order to bring it front and center, I would suggest you contact the Historic Preservation Committee. I can't think of the name of it. It's one of our city commissions. Have a resolution and consider a pop-up camp, maybe whenever you get it done, because this is extremely important. 80% of the questions asked can be answered with a answer of history. And this is very important, and it brings highlight to our fire department. So do me that 1, 2, 3, 4 favors, and I will be very grateful.
All right.
Not a problem.
I don't ask for much. So anyway, any more questions? And personally, you can count on my support financially, not a problem. So anyway, any other questions from the body? I don't know if our police or Office of Emergency Management are out there. If they're not, they're certainly excused. We don't need to go through that. Ms. City Council Associate, do we have any police of Office of Emergency? They're here. Oh, I see their name. I see OEMD pop up. Okay. All right, gentlemen from the fire department, thank you so much. Alderman Payon, did you have any questions or comments from the fire department?
Absolutely none.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to, let's go to OEMD Director, Chief Simmons, and then we'll move on to police.
Good evening, everybody. I'll be glad to report out next public safety meeting on my budget. It'll take all of 30 seconds. So I'm the best deal in town.
We knew that.
True.
We knew that already.
You work, Chief.
So I have 2 different spotlight segments today, and I'm going to be brief because I know all the attention is with the police department. I want to make sure I give them a chance to actually talk about all the stuff that's been going on in the police department. So go ahead and hit next slide, please. My spotlight is on my new employee. Her name is Nicole Reiber. The Office of Emergency Management has hired a new exercise training and outreach coordinator. Her name is Nicole Reiber. In this particular role, Ms. Reiber will be responsible for developing training and exercise initiatives for the public and city employees. She will be delivering presentations to the council and other community groups. She will be supporting us in every area of emergency management's core mission of planning and response, outreach, grants management, and emergency operations center support. Go ahead. Thank you. Nicole brings a wealth of education and experience to Annapolis. She holds a bachelor's in arts degree from from George Mason University and has served with the U.S. Department of State and the FBI. She is the first Latina hired by OEM, and we are looking forward to the impact she will have on our ability to provide outreach to the Hispanic community. We welcome Nicole to our team and to the city of Annapolis, and I'll be glad for you all to meet her eventually. Next slide, please. So another spotlight is the Pip Moyer Vaccination Clinic. Next slide. The city of Annapolis has partnered with the Anne Arundel County Health Department to provide vaccination opportunities at Pip Moyer on Wednesdays and Thursdays. However, the Thursday clinic is totally managed and run by city employees, not so much the health department. These employees are dedicated to creating opportunities for our residents to receive a vaccination at a familiar place, the Pip Moyer Rec Center. Under the direction of Battalion Chief Rob Christian, the team provides vaccination shots to the public, and MK Seborowski from OEM manages all the logistics for the clinic, which is supported by OEM, Fire Department, Annapolis Police Department, who has a big cadre of folks there helping us manage that. The last two sessions that we've had, we've only had 2 Thursdays. And the Thursdays that we've had, we've vaccinated 403 folks. Eastport Volunteer Fire Company has been helping out. The Annapolis Rec and Parks Department, who actually sets up the vaccination clinic. The mayor's office has been helping. The Annapolis Planning and Zoning and Human Resources. So any questions on my spotlight? Yes, sir.
Excellent as always. Thank you. Alderman Gay, you have a question? Questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So with we're rolling out the vaccination distribution center at the Navy Stadium, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Where's the second one? Are there 2 or just 1 in the city of Annapolis?
We have a lot of little satellite vaccination clinics. We've been engaging a lot of the churches. I know Mount Moriah, John Wesley, Mount Olive, and First Baptist, I think, is having one coming up. Mount Zion, they call those community clinics. I call them pop-up clinics. They're typically a one and done, even though I know a lot of the pastors are trying to get it more clinics at their church. But for right now, they have the initial first shot clinic, and then they come back about a month later and get their second shots there. And then we like you said, they're thinking about April the 15th will be the start of the Navy Marine Corps Stadium Mass Clinic, which is a partnership with the state and the county and the city of Annapolis. They want to do about 3,000 folks there a day. It'll be about 100 folks working. It'll be a combination of personnel from all 3 entities.
Yeah, and so, so if I had to look for a project manager, it would be Battalion Chief Christian and MK.
A project manager?
So, like, are they overseeing the rollout of the vaccine processes and and like traffic and just all of the things that would go into? I mean, if 3,000 cars a day are rolling through, the neighborhood near the stadium or whatever, and I mean, in Royal Boulevard has that horrible light anyway. Is there a system put in place to ensure that this is just efficient as possible? I'm sure there is, but I'm just asking to be kind of just briefed on that quickly.
So just to clarify things, MK and Battalion Chief Christian is running Pip Moyer on Thursdays. They're running Pip Moyer on Thursdays. There have been meetings, and I've been to a few, but not all, where the cadre of stadium folks are meeting with stadium authorities to come up with the plan to manage that mass clinic. Now, I know fire department has a limited role. They're going to provide EMS coverage at the clinic. I know the police have a limited role. They're going to provide security. And I would imagine some of the security issues would be managing the traffic issues that's going to be caused by that clinic there. This is not a drive-through clinic like we did the drive-through flu. This is a clinic where you drive, you park, you get out of your car, you go through a process, you get your shot, you get back into your car, and you leave. So typically at mass back sites, folks are saying that they stay there anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes. So pretty quick.
Madam Chair, how will we inquire, maybe through the office of the city manager? I'm not sure. And maybe the chiefs could give me a breakdown of, how is this being paid for? If we are, sending staff, to be there to monitor the situation, assist with traffic, security, all of that stuff, is the state reimbursing the city for, time spent with our employees here at this vaccination site?
So it's my understanding.
Director Simmons shaking his head.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Director Simmons.
So it's my understanding that they enter into an MOU with the state for the different services. And the city of Annapolis Fire and Police, who are going to be a part of this process, will receive their reimbursement from the county. Is that right, Chief Romali?
Yes, monthly the state will be reimbursing Anne Arundel County for the cost associated with it, which will then be passed to the city of Annapolis for our costs involved. The county and the state have a lot more people involved in this process. Like Chief Simmons said, we've been parts of just a few meetings there, but last I heard, they were going to have 123 staff members on site every day at this facility. But it is, the money's coming from the federal government for these vaccination sites, and then it's filtered down. But our cost involved in it will be reimbursable through that.
Awesome. I appreciate that very much. I look forward to it. I'm just reading here now, the governor announces that if you're 16 or older, you'll be eligible to work there and you get a shot. And it's good pay too. So people can take advantage of that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Can we go to one more slide, please?
I don't know if Alderman Payon has a question, Chief Simmons.
Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Chief. So this is going to be different from, say, Waldorf, where people never got out of their cars or don't get out of their cars to get shots. There won't be anything like that?
No, to my understanding, they explored the option of a drive-through process, and they decided to go against that. You will see some huge tents in the parking lot of the Navy Marine Corps Stadium, and basically you come park, get out your car, kind of walk up. You'll be guided through the process.
Okay.
And with 35 minutes later, 35 to 45 minutes later, you will have a shot.
They've already got that big, ugly building up. I hope we don't get any windstorms between now and the time they're finished giving it out. Presumably, there will only be a few cars at a time that are leaving that parking area. I know they're fast, but I'm just thinking in terms of traffic at that light, and not everybody's going to be making a right turn. I assume it's in and out on Farragut Road.
So I have not been privy to a lot of the meetings that have gone on there. I'm hoping to get more information. I do have questions that's just like you have.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll get to go to a couple more meetings, and then I can come back to the committee and kind of explain the process.
Well, could you let me know as soon as you find something out? I could pass it on to the community, and I'm not aware that anybody is horrendously concerned with the traffic issues, but just want to make sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll make it my business to do that for you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So just to give you an idea of where we are with vaccinations in the city of Annapolis as of March 28th, 2021, we've had a total of 17,102 vaccinations in the city of Annapolis. First shots, we had 10,917. And second shots, which completes the cycle for two of the vaccinations, or the single dose J&J, we've had 6,185. Any questions about that? And I think we have a little over 40,000 folks here. Julian, can you go to slide 23? I'm not going to do a long presentation tonight. The nights have been long enough, but if you can go to slide 23, I'll wrap it up.
Chief, can I interrupt you for a second? Do we know what kind of vaccine is going to be given? Is it Johnson & Johnson or is it a 2-dose?
I think that they know the week before. I get that question. I get that question a lot for the Pitt Moyer. I think the first time we were out, we were Moderna, and last Thursday we were Pfizer, and I don't know what we're having this week.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So just to kind of wrap up my presentation, I'll just do the year-to-date overview on opioids. Next slide, please. So the 2021 overview as of the 30th of March, we've had a total of 28 overdoses, 20 occurrences where we gave Narcan. We've had 4 fatal overdoses. They died, with 3 pending the disposition from the medical examiner. So pretty much we're on course for about 7 fatal overdoses. So where are they occurring? We had 3 of them in Ward 1. We had 2 in Ward 2. We have 5 overdoses in Ward 3, 6 in Ward 4, 1 in Ward 5, 4 in Ward 6, 3 in Ward 7, and 4 in Ward 8. Next slide, please. Who is it affecting? Of our 28 overdoses, 13 have been African-American, 14 have been white, 1 have been Hispanic, 22 have been male, 6 have been female. Age range, the biggest age range we're seeing is 25 to the 34 age range, where we had 11. And I cannot see my pie chart because it's being blocked by all of you guys. So we have 19 instances of overdoses with heroin or opioids. We have 7 unknown substance, and then we have 2 of other, probably a polysubstance of more than 1. Next slide, please. So year-to-date comparison, where are we in 2020 as opposed to 2021? Last year at this time, we had 32 overdoses and 5 fatals. And this year is 28 and 4 fatals with 3 pending. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's 7. However, I understand over the weekend, we had 2 fatal overdoses. Over the weekend, I think in Ward 6. I have not received the word on that. If Chief Romero, if you have any more information, you might be able to chime in on this. So with the 2 additional fatals, we're up to 9 fatals. So we're on course to pass what we did in 2020. And if you remember, in 2020, our fatals increased by 123%.
You were right. It was 2 females. It was 2 females.
It wasn't a good weekend. Nice outside, but not a good weekend as far as public safety is concerned. And I wanted to cut my presentation. I had a lot more to present, but I want to be respectful of Chief Jackson's time, and I know he has a lot to talk about. Alderman Gay.
Thanks. I'm just I met with Katie Edwards last week, and we had a really good talk about the opioid issue. And she proposed some, ideas. And I'm just trying to figure out, where do we currently stand with, the money's not a thing because we've committed to putting the money behind it. So where do we stand with just rolling some of these out, or, just getting a better understanding of this? It's getting so close to home. This is a lot of my friends who I've went to school with and stuff are either being affected themselves or their family members are being affected. And so we just seeing it too often, it's crazy. This weekend was really, really sad. It was really sad to the point that you made. Actually, one of my friends' moms who I'm with like every weekend, all the time, she passed away this weekend from an overdose. And so I don't know. What can we do? What can we do? Like, I was literally scratching my head about this all weekend. Like,
Julian, can you put up the org chart, please? And I want to kind of explain this to you. I think Alderman Gay, last time we met at Public Safety, I kind of got the feeling that you thought that we weren't all working together on this issue. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit tonight. But can you see that org chart?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is pretty much our attack to opioids. Where if you look at the top, Dr. Kalyana Raman, we work closely with his office because this is certainly a health emergency. And basically the four main departments that are working on this is the Office of Emergency Management, the Police Department, the Fire Department, and the Mayor's office, with the city manager and the chair of public safety. If you go down to your far left where it says prevention, right? Mm-hmm. These are all of our prevention programs that we have. To run these prevention programs cost about $98,000 a year. So we have the NAM related programs that's run out of the mayor's office. We have Your Life Matters program that's run out of the fire department. They deal with Narcan training, hands-only CPR, and other things. You have the OD Free Annapolis, which is it's a data resource and helps folks get in touch with resources, and that's run out of OEM. And then you have the APD's Intervention and Education Program, which is a pretty neat program because it puts a clinician and an officer together to follow up on all overdoses. And they have a youth program to educate youth. And the medical return box, so as not to, if you have opioids of some sort, you can take them to the med return box. You can take your any type of medication there, and that's in the lobby of the police department. The enforcement part of it is where people on special units and APD, and they may want to talk a little bit more about that, they come out and they stop the purveyors of drugs, and they stop drugs from being in our community and get drugs out of our community. So that's the enforcement arm of it. And then we have harm reduction, which is controversial. So we've hired someone in the Office of Emergency Management. They're on our payroll. They are in the street all the time. They know the community, and they're out there giving out fentanyl strips and Narcan distribution, and they train.
Madam Chair, if I could really quickly.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Director Simmons. Just because of the time, it's 7. And so I really want to see this. And so what we had to reschedule at the Housing and Human Welfare meeting was an update from the city manager of those programs under prevention. And so we had to reschedule that. I'm wondering if maybe, and here I go again with the joint meeting, we meet together on that date, Housing and Human Welfare and Public Safety that evening. And Director Simmons could come with this chart, and maybe after David's, presentation, he could share as well, so that it's all in one. We're getting the information at the same setting. Because I'm also just trying, I really want to go into depth about this, and we can have questions and stuff after. And it's 7 o'clock.
So
we've been on for 3 hours. So
this was actually close to a half an hour presentation that I did not do tonight because of the time, because of the first meeting and all, but I'll be glad to take this presentation either next public safety committee meeting or any other committee meeting. So let's.
Director Simmons, I want to bring up something that I brought up a couple of years ago. And I think, in my opinion, the only way we're going to really get to the heart of this is to drill down to see a semi-profile of every victim. Because once you kind of either talking to the family, trying to figure out what happened, because once you kind of get a profile of the victim, certain things will start to emerge that become routine in all of the victims. That's my own personal plea, that we look at each victim as a result of their demise or usage or whatever, and find some continuing theme of what ran through it. And from there, we can target whatever program, because whatever is the theme in Ward 6 may not be the theme in Ward 4. And then the other thing is we know that there are people who come from outside of our jurisdiction and overdose in our jurisdiction. And I'm not saying we should minimize that or discount it, but that's not necessarily a profile we need to look at. We need to look at our residents who are suffering here, finding out whether it's from a family member because of their demise or from them themselves, to see where they should plug in. And from there, you start to get a complete picture of where we can hone in our resources. I mean, Your Life Matters may work in Ward 6, but NAM may do well in Ward 3. And where in Ward 3? Is it in a certain community? Is it on a certain street? And I know we cannot give out that information, because once we start drilling down, then we identify the persons. But I think each ward alderperson, at least I do, I want to know in Ward 3 where those 6 were. I need to know that, because it may be in a certain community, it may be on a certain street. I need to know that. It may be a certain family member. It may have happened before. But I think for every ward, we need to drill down on a profile and figure out what's going to work in some. It may be a quality of life issue in Ward 2. I don't know. So that, for me, is the only way we're going to be able to get a handle on any of this. And I mentioned this a couple of years ago.
So, yeah, thank you. So we do the Annapolis Opioid Intervention Team meets every other month, and during that meeting, we actually review all the fatal overdoses. You know, what happened, where they bought what they died from, where did they get it? Are they Annapolis resident? If they're not, and that's important, even if they're not, to kind of review it. Are they coming here because our drugs are that good, or did they buy it somewhere else and just come here? We need to know all that information. So I'll be glad to talk about this a little bit more in depth. There's a whole presentation behind this.
But Chief Simmons, I also want to know, I want to get down even further. Did they finish high school? That sort of thing. Because if we don't know that, then we know we need to maybe do a literacy program or something like that. If that's what the real cause is. Did they suffer from a mental health issue? Was their father incarcerated? And that was really the focus of their troubles. I mean, I want to get really, really deep into this. That way, that's the only way, in my estimation, we're going to be able to really find out who's more susceptible to whatever it may be in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'll say this is the last thing so we can get to Chief Jackson. But Alderman Gay, this is the organizational structure that we work in to combat opioids and other substance use disorder. You know, we're not in a silo. We're working together.
I appreciate this. I definitely I'll get with Alderwoman Pindell Charles offline to see if we can, how we'll figure out the scheduling or whatever. But we definitely got to do this because, like I said, it was just a horrible, horrible weekend for us. So sad.
It was.
Chief Simmons' question is what I'm saying makes sense.
It does, and we should get together and talk a little bit more about it, and maybe we can put something together.
And that may be an issue if the person had, say, a record, what their parole and probation officer was dealing with them on, what issues were troubling to them. That would be really highlighting the source of what happened.
So what we can do is when we do the next review of our fatals, maybe you can make it. I think you might have been to one or two of them because you've come to our opioid intervention team meetings and all. So you can see what we talk about and you can make some suggestions.
Okay. All right. And if I'm not there, you can certainly suggest it on my behalf because I may not be able to make them all, but certainly feel free to make the suggestion on my behalf.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Can we take 1 minute break? I've got to check on my grandson.
So we're looking at about 11 o'clock p.m. finish time.
I had a bigger presentation, but in the interest of time, I just kind of took a couple highlights.
I'm supposed to be on a panel right now for the Annapolis Film Festival. I'm texting them like, look, I'm running late. It's important stuff, though. I don't know, man. That really wraps. I was even looking at studies from like Vancouver this weekend with some of the work that they did with opioid intervention. And I really can't wrap my mind around it. Okay. I mean, well, we can have general discussion, right? Okay. Yeah, but that'll be, I would hope to, yeah.
Well, you should reach out to me, DeJuan, and we'll sit down and have a little conversation about it. I know it was a big concern of yours at the last Public Safety Committee meeting.
Mm-hmm. I'll message you, definitely.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We're ready to restart. Thank you so much for that 1 minute break. All is well.
Amen.
Yes, you can. He always asks for a cookie when I'm on a meeting. I'm more susceptible that way.
A meeting this long, you got to bribe them with the whole box.
I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, thank you, Chief Simmons, Chief O'Malley, and we'll move. We're not necessarily saving the best for last, but let's see. All right, Chief Jackson, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Madam Chair. Good evening.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. To my colleagues. It's so much stuff, but I'll keep it brief. There's so many things. Some things probably wouldn't be.
Deputy Chief Bradford, good to see you, sir.
I'll start off with, did you know our computer-aided dispatch came up and running, was fully implemented last week. CAD, commonly referred to as CAD. What computer-aided dispatch does, it does many things, really. But the main thing that it does, it increases our effectiveness and our efficiency into responding to calls. It should decrease our response time. The CAD system has a GPS system. It tracks all the vehicles on the screen, so the dispatcher has the ability, should something real hot or something of an extreme emergency nature come out, she can send the closest car as opposed to the post car. So, for example, if somebody got struck by a vehicle, God forbid, on West Street, if it's a unit, whatever units in that's in close proximity, or whatever unit that is closer will get the call and to get there to render aid. So we're excited about that. Computer-aided dispatch has a hazard file. For example, if somebody's a known police fighter or they pose a threat and we have the information, we can database that to alert officers to be careful, and also the dispatcher can automatically assign a backup, given the nature of the call and the people involved. So on so many levels, it protects the officers, and it really increases our efficiency in terms of our response time. And so it's just up and running last week, and we're still learning how to use it. But from what I understand, that we've had very good training, and we prepared very vigorously to make sure that once it's implemented and up and running as it is as we speak, the citizens of Annapolis can ensure that they should see a difference in how we respond to calls for service, especially emergency calls. Also, many of you probably read in the paper, there was near Annapolis, headed for Annapolis, we're certain, 44 pounds of cocaine was seized by the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, along with the Department of Natural Resources, Police, the Coast Guard, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we had our officers, our detectives assigned to that task force. The drugs was found in the wheel well. No arrest has been made, but the investigation is ongoing. So the intelligence that I've received briefly, not limited to that, but in all probability, the drugs were headed here in the city of Annapolis and Baltimore, in the region. Those drugs are going to be distributed in the region to include Annapolis, probably Baltimore, and throughout Anne Arundel County. But it was 22 bricks of cocaine, 44 pounds, which is several kilos of cocaine. So for my friends, Directors Chief Simmons and Chief Romali, hopefully that the whatever quantity was going to end up in Annapolis will diminish our response to overdoses, because everything is laced with fentanyl now. I don't care what type of drug it is. If it's street drugs, it's a high probability that it's laced with fentanyl. And of course, that causes the overdose crisis. Everything's laced. Marijuana, cocaine, heroin, everything's laced with fentanyl now. So I'm grateful to our federal partners, our other state partners, the United States Coast Guard, and also kudos to Annapolis PD was represented in that process. And so any more information to come, I will make sure, Madam Chair, that I inform the committee. Also, we just entered into an MOU with the United States Marshal Service. Since I've been here, I'm coming from Baltimore, and Stan, he grew up under that type of administration. We try to make as many federal partners as we can. One of the things that lacked in the Annapolis PD prior to my arrival, not to be self-grandizing, I really don't mean it to sound like that, but it just didn't occur. We had a little or no relationship with many of our federal partners. You can't survive like that. So we're still cultivating those relationships. And I'm proud to announce that last week, Detective McDonald and his investigation units has sent one of our detectives to be deputized as a United States Marshal. What that means in short term, if we have a fugitive that's committed a crime in the city of Annapolis, that flees this jurisdiction, it cuts down on our time to get a flight warrant. And generally we get flight warrants for serious crimes like bank robbery, commercial robbery, and of course murder, needless to say murder. What it does is that because we have somebody now who is a Deputy U.S. Marshal, we just notify the Marshal Service, although they remain an Annapolis police officer or detective, they have the authority, because they're deputized as United States Marshal, to circumvent that process. We can go anywhere in the world and pick them up. We can go in the Caribbean and pick somebody up without having to go through the bureaucracy had we not had that relationship. So I'm really excited about that. We only have one deputized right now. Deputy Chief Bradford and I would like to have two. But Deputy Chief says, well, Chief, we can only spare one right now, but one is good enough. So that officer, whoever we're looking for, we have the ability now that we didn't have 2 weeks ago to go and pick up somebody constitutionally and legally without having to get a flight warrant from the FBI or some of our other federal agencies. So I'm excited about that. Lastly, Bill Green from Anne Arundel County, he's their certified forensic scientist, came in last week, and I think it was at 5 Stan. He did 5 detectives, trained them to help them get certification and to identify and lift latent prints, and also gave them instruction on forensic photography, because as you well know, we lost, was it Kayla, our forensic, our crime lab person, and until we can get somebody else, I'm trying to make the best use of the resources that I have available to me. And the prints would hold up in court, and the lifting of those prints or the identification of those latent prints will lift up in court as long as we have training from somebody who is certified to do so. And they go through, and the officers complete the training. So they completed the training right here at 199 Taylor Avenue last week. I gave opening remarks before their last day of training, and thank them and thank Bill Green from Anne Arundel County for taking the time out of his busy schedule to train our officers. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't make them full-fledged forensic scientists, not at all, but it does give them the ability to lift evidence and collect evidence and take photographs of evidence in the event that we're shorthanded. So we're just trying to make the best out of, in these very, very lean times, we're trying to make the best of the resources that we have, because we still, at the core of what we do, and we can never, ever, ever, Madam Chair, get away from our core value of providing public safety to the residents and protect every Annapolis citizen from those who come to do harm, any predators that come here to do harm. If we can't prevent it, then we have to collect evidence, and that we can hold them accountable under the rule of law and constitutionally in the court of law. So yeah, I could say a lot more, but I know everybody's been here a long time, and if you permit me, I'm glad to answer any questions that's brought before me. And I have Deputy Chief Bradford. If I can't answer him, hopefully he can. So between the two of us, we should come up with an answer.
Okay. Any questions from the public safety members? Alderman Payon or Alderman Gay?
I'm here. No questions.
In general, or about what he just discussed?
What he just discussed, and we'll see what other information they have for us today.
Gosh, I'm blanking on what he just even discussed. The why?
We talked about the CAD system, the cocaine seizure, the MOU with the Marshal Service, and additional personnel being trained in forensics.
He mentioned that they lost one position, and I'm wondering what's the timetable on them getting that position filled. I think you said was it forensics or IT?
No, forensics. We have a number of positions, Alderman Gay, that we need to fill. We really do, and everybody knows that. But I can't think of Kayla's last name, but she left me about a month ago, and she was the only certified forensic specialist that we had. Of course, she got a raise in another jurisdiction, and so she moved on. So what we're trying to do is reclass that position. I have Rhonda McCoy working on that, because we have to have a competitive salary. It's one thing to obtain them, but we to recruit them, but we have to retention is important, is what I'm trying to say. We have to retain them, and the only way you retain them is that we pay them fair market value for their services. So we're working on that very hard to, of course we're in a budget season, so all that has to be factored in, and I have to make the argument for those type of positions during the budget hearings, which I intend to do.
So is this a contributing factor? Because often when we think of incidents that take place in the community, the first thing we say is bam, it's the officer on the scene, like the walking officer. What do you call them? I'm sorry, God. Patrol officers. Mm-hmm. I apologize, patrol officers. We first think it's a patrol officer, like, oh, well, we didn't have an officer on the street. But on the flip side, in investigation, if you don't have forensics, you can't investigate. And so is the lack of a legitimate forensic team a part of the delay that we see in investigation and maybe just getting some of the necessary reports and response out in a timely manner? Is that something that has to go in?
No, not really, because it should be noted, Alderman Gay, that our neighboring jurisdiction, Anne Arundel County, and I since I've been chief, I can't account for previous chiefs, but since I've been chief, and especially since Amala Ward has come in, she's new and she wants to do a good job, and she recognized the importance of the partnership. So until we can fill that position, we'll be utilizing those people. We'll be utilizing them. Of course, Prince George's County has never turned us down. The problem with that, though, when we do it, the state police, of course, are at our disposal. But my frustration is that when we need things in real time, we can't go into other people's house. Although they're willing to help us 100%, we have to get on their waiting list because they have their crime they have to process. Not that the work don't get done. Once we collect the evidence and secure it, I'm confident that one of our partners will assist us. But what I want the ability to do is to be able to collect it in real time. So when people will go out there to investigate a shooting or a homicide or some other nefarious crime, that we have the ability to collect and analyze our own data in real time. And we're working towards that end. Of course, we are CLIA accredited, and I want us the next cycle, when we're evaluated, I want us to get what we got the last year. Not only did we meet the standards, but of course we got meritorious standards based on what we told them we would do. But eventually what we told them we would do and what we were able to demonstrate what we were doing and have done next year, it's like Janet Jackson's 1986 hit, "What have you done for me lately?" Not what you've done in the past. And that's how these accreditation bodies work. No matter what you've done in the past, you could have the Medal of Honor standing next to your accreditation certificate. They'll snatch both of them off the wall if you haven't met the mandates. And we're not in danger of doing that, but I just want the ability as good police administration to make sure that we recruit and retain the best people. But in the interim, to answer your question, I'm not worried that evidence will go unanalyzed and definitely won't go uncollected. My issue is that we can do it as expedient as possible.
Is it possible if you or a member of the staff could send out a graph? And so, for example, covering both administrative and patrol staff, if they're like forensics, right? And there's 8 staff members under forensics. Would it be possible if you sent out, this is the staff under the forensics team or whatever. This is how many we need. This is how many we have. So we could get a better understanding of exactly where you are short in regards to the staffing in the department. Because as I, alluded to earlier, I think it's all a machine, And so again, what the public often sees is the patrol, and we look there and say, "Oh, we should have had somebody walking or something," And in cases, it's like maybe we didn't need somebody walking. Maybe we needed an additional officer patrolling social media or something, so that they could have been proactive in stopping an incident. You get what I'm saying? Just making sure that we're fully staffed across the board, so that in cases where there may be. Just so we're covering all, dotting our I's and crossing the T's. That's what
I get what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. The patrol function should be, in a well-oiled machine, is a high visibility, a source of information. What I'm trying to do as a part of my community policing philosophy and model is that officers are guardians, meaning that the community gets a sense of security just by the officers present, knowing their officer. And so all those things are important. That's the importance of the uniformed officer. And I still believe, theoretically, that's the backbone of any department. People give lip service to that, but don't give the resources to it. And I'm not talking about Annapolis. I'm just talking about American policing. One of the biggest problems with American policing is that often the very people who we purport to perform certain functions don't do that. So what I'm trying to do in Annapolis, because we're manageable here, I've been saying that since the day I got here, because of the population and the size of our department, it is manageable. I can't do it all myself. I need all forces. I need our political forces our other social agencies. I need everybody to assist if we're going to be successful in that. But to your point, there's no cookie cutter approach. The prototypical patrol officer in uniform can prevent crime by his or her very presence, but not only by their presence, by their ability to engage the community appropriately. People got to know, for example, if I put somebody in the 1100 block of Madison Street and Harbor House or on Frederick Douglass Court and Eastport Terrace, then the community has to know that officer, word has to be on the street that officer knows the residents, he knows the layout, he knows who should be there, who shouldn't be there, that the officer has a real good handle on reasonable articulable suspicion and be able to distinguish that from probable cause so we don't get in any violation rights. But and conversely, stay with me for one more second. If a shooting does occur or some other serious crime, that officer can collect the preliminary investigation efficiently enough so by the time the detectives get there, he'll make their job easy, and the detectives can do the forensics and the data collection and the interviewing of witnesses, the interrogation of probable suspects, and write the warrants, and that's how it should work. And so what I'm trying to do is draw clear lines of authority. And then the other component to that is supervision. So I hear that often, and I think it's a very valid question, but I think what we need to do is demystify the roles of police officer versus detective. And I'll say one more thing. The importance of the training from Bill Green in Anne Arundel County and forensic scientists, I'm a firm believer, and Stan shares my view, not because I'm the chief and he's the deputy chief, but we work together in Baltimore, and we've seen the power of officers learning why they do what they do. And so I had said in my remarks that I want everybody trained in forensic science at some point in their career. They have to know how to collect data and know how the data is processed and the evidence is processed and why it's important firsthand, not because somebody told them, but as good police officers. And that way we're investing in our community, and then they make better guardians. So they know what evidence to preserve and to collect. We have far too many officers, they're stepping in their own crime scene, or they're not putting the cordoned off tape further off enough. They don't understand how to do a grid search or quadrant search and all these other things. They don't even know the language. And I'm not talking about my own department, because I think most of the men and women in the Annapolis Police Department do a hell of a job. They do things that, again, I can't say it enough, that most agencies don't do. The average police officer in the city of Annapolis is proficient at least two skills, highly proficient in at least two separate and distinct skills that a lot of departments would separate, bifurcate in divisions when we do it. Our patrol officers are our SWAT officers. Our detectives are our SWAT officers. Our patrol officers doing community engagement. Our patrol officers do crisis intervention. So most of us multitask. And it's gotten to the point now, you're looking at the command staff in the Annapolis Police Department. I have done right now because we're making wholesale changes to change the entire culture. So you're looking at Chief Jackson and Deputy Chief Stanley Bradford, and that's the command staff in the Annapolis Police Department. I challenge you, look anywhere in Maryland where you have your deputy chief and your chief performing and involved in the day-to-day operations of the department, in addition to making decisions, administrative decisions. Yes, sir.
You mean to tell me you want the homicide detectives to be evidence technicians in their own cases? I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, homicide detectives.
How can they possibly focus on finding the bad guy and getting evidence from them?
Homicide.
They've got to worry about closing a crime scene, patrolling a crime scene, putting the gloves on, getting this, getting that.
So there's nothing wrong with that. Homicide detective and officers, they should be experts.
Sure, when nobody else is available, I agree.
They should be experts in identifying, preserving, and collecting evidence. They don't analyze. Most evidence get lost at that level. If we're waiting for some expert to come in, which we don't have, to analyze and collect that, it would never happen. So that's why the homicide detective, the officers, our crime lab tech that collects is a police officer. So they have to be proficient. And not only that, the detective can tell you what association
that that particular piece of evidence had to that crime. So there's no problem with them knowing exactly what that is. They just make sure it's preserved, make sure it's collected, and then analysis get done by a crime lab.
And for example, Alderman Payon, for example, just on the blood splatter, I think every officer and detective should reasonably know what occurred, whether the wound was self-inflicted, because people will lie to you. They shot themselves and threw the gun in the bushes. And they'll tell you some bogus suspect shot them. Why? Because they know they're going to get charged with being in possession of a gun. So we should be able to look at a wound and look at the trajectory of a wound, or look at the blood splatter to determine what happened. Not only gunshot evidence, but if somebody was hit with some type of cylindrical object. And so I know the power in it. It doesn't take away, and you're talking to two people, by the way, the chief and the deputy chief who was homicide detectives. It doesn't take away the ability. What it does is it enhances their ability, and they can work in tandem to collect the right evidence at the right time. Because like Stan said, most evidence, not analyze it, but most evidence is lost at the crime scene or contaminated.
I understand everything that you've said. I convicted a murderer when Kevin Krause was a uniformed officer, and he acted as the evidence tech in the case, and he did a fine job. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a guy who's got 16 other things going, trying to talk to witnesses, trying to examine a crime scene, trying to line up all sorts of things. He's got the homicide detective has got 20 other responsibilities right now, and I can't imagine that you want him or her to regularly act as the evidence tech in their own cases. I've never seen. I've tried many.
No, sir, that's not what I'm saying. No, sir. Go ahead, Stan. Go ahead.
So the homicide detective is not the evidence tech in his own case. He's there to make sure that it's identified, that it's preserved, and that it's collected. Then he will go with the crime lab analysts to determine what value that evidence that was collected. So he's not doing those things.
That is different from what I could have sworn I heard, but thank you very much.
No, sir, but I want them to understand, Alderman Payon, not to belabor the point, but I want them to understand that's a part of having a well-trained, educated police department.
No, I get that. I understand that part of it. Like I said, Kevin Krause was a uniformed officer at the time, and he did a fine job and he was qualified. When it came to court, he was qualified as an expert, and he certainly did a fine job with the evidence that he collected. I know that we're capable of doing that, and
until you give me some money too, Alderman, this is a temporary fix until you give me some money to hire some more people. So we're not talking about this as a permanent part of what we do. We're just talking about until you give me some more money, sir.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, any more questions? Chief or Deputy Chief, did you all want to present anything else to us this evening?
No, I think that there's a lot of other things we could say. We have a lot of stuff going on. We're working that homicide that occurred Saturday real hard. We have officers working now. We're getting briefed literally 24 hours a day. It's a lot of moving parts to that. I'll say that. I don't want to misspeak, but it's a lot of moving parts of that investigation. And myself and the deputy are monitoring it because we are the command staff. And to Alderman Payon's point that, you know this firsthand. Everybody on the screen knows it firsthand. You'll see us at crime scenes if we're needed to lend the support that needs to be lent, as evidence in a number of cases here in the city of Annapolis.
And believe me, I've been at some of the crime scenes and in my capacity as an alderman, and it's sometimes a little tough to hold myself back and take that state's attorney's hat off, but I've observed everything, and it's been fine. It's been well done. So.
And these are the tough times, Alderman Payon. It's not that we're micromanaging or we're trying to overburden. No. We're just trying to make the best utilization of the resources that we have until times get better, because my oath is to continue to provide public safety. And I get frustrated sometimes when we don't have the resources, but I don't want that to be an excuse if I'm making sense.
I understand that. Not a problem.
Okay. All right. Thank you. One thing I
don't know,
will
Kevin,
say,
if there's anything that you wanted me to talk about that I missed, I was talking to Kevin Simmons. Is there anything that I missed that you wanted me to bring up? You're
on mute, Chief Simmons. Chief Simmons, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Chief Simmons, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Let me try that again. I didn't have anything. I just want to make sure that you got on. I know you had a lot of stuff going on, Chief. I just wanted to make ample time for you to actually talk to the.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I know I've been trying to move fast, so I didn't want to miss anything that you may have thought that I should have touched on. I know we talked about some things offline, intelligence and all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to miss anything. So I was trying to give a condensed version, but before I finish. But I think I've covered everything recently. The main thing is that last week, I'm happy that the CAD system is up and running. And, that's huge on so many levels. And I'm looking forward to that. That'll even assist Doug and the fire department. The CAD system will assist them. And I'll extend that to Doug too. Is there anything I missed, Doug?
Yeah, you're good, Chief.
Okay, but we have a whole lot of stuff going on, and
everybody.
Yeah, we consumed with multiple investigations. Of course, we had the leadership change with the two captains, but we're trying to reimagine and repurpose the Annapolis Police Department to be in line with community expectations and work to make it, a world-class agency and be ahead of this national trend. Because I'm not shy. Alderwoman Pindell Charles, I'm not shy. I'm totally against defunding the police. What I am in support of is reimagining police and taking the police service and making it more amenable to solve some of these problems, such as poverty and mental illness and drug addiction and all those kind of things, and make sure we have the right kind of response so that the community understands that we're not the enemy. But to dismantle law enforcement, I think it's a big mistake. And I'm horrified by the talk, because if you listen to people, especially at the federal level and some at the state level, I don't need to call out names, they don't have any plan to replace dismantling, but it sounds good in the short term because it panders to the mob. But then once it's dismantled, fire is going to be overrun, OEM is going to be overrun, and I'm afraid that we won't be able to retain qualified men and women, especially when they can go to our neighbors, Anne Arundel County, if they start hiring and they don't have to face those kind of things. So I'm hoping that however this ends up, we'll do it judiciously, and we'll do it not that serves the best interest of Ed Jackson or Stan Bradford, but whatever serves the best interest of the citizens of Annapolis and the men and women that we took an oath to lead, because we have to consider these officers too. And we got to keep them engaged, and got to give them hope that the oath that they took, that we're going to protect them and honor their service as well. So that'll be all that I have.
Thank you, Chief. The other thing I want to mention too, we in the city of Annapolis, and I've been here a long time, thank God we haven't had some of the issues that other police departments and law enforcement have had. Yes, we've had our homicides, which are horrible. One homicide is horrible, but we have not, knock on wood, had a lot of the issues that other jurisdictions have had. We've had overall a very good group of leaders, at least since I've been on the city council. Not that things could have been approved, not that things could have been done better, but I breathe a sigh of relief every day when we get through a day when we don't have some of the things that I see going on with police departments in other jurisdictions. And I think the height of what we've been seeing is what's going on in Minneapolis, which is horrifying to say the least. And thank God we don't have that. I have not seen it. But we've got our issues, we got our challenges, and we're going to work on those. The other thing is too, oftentimes when you come from a larger jurisdiction like Baltimore City, you learn to try to make do with what you have. And I learned that firsthand. Picking up paper clips off the floor because we couldn't afford to buy more. Taking paper in from Xerox, from Office Depot that I had to buy myself. I mean, there are just some things that we had to do to make it run and make it go. But that should not thwart what we need to do for our police department here. We're not asking you to do that. That's not fair to our residents. It's not fair to the police department. It's not fair to public safety. To kind of piece together, for lack of a better term, what we need to do. We did a lot for that in Baltimore City. We had to piece together a lot of things to make it work. And that should not be the way it is. But we knew we had to do it. And so I say that to say we want a CALEA accredited, a class 1, a first class set of public safety 3-team approach to being able to fund what we need to fund, whether it's community policing, whether it's another engine, whether it's a new staff member, an OEM. We need to be able to not work on a shoestring. That does not bode well for no one. I know what it's like, and it's not pretty. And so I don't want that happening to Annapolis. It should not happen to Annapolis. We had enough of that in Baltimore City, where we had to work off shoestrings, like I said, picking up paper clips literally off the floor in the offices because we couldn't afford any more, or buying Xerox paper ourselves. That is not fair, and I don't want that happening here in our city. So I just that's my soapbox for today. I know it's late, but sometimes you gotta say what you gotta say. And I think the public who watches needs to know that. We need first class here. My father used to say, you can't go in a steakhouse with hot dog money, and you can't. You gotta pay a little more to go first class. That's what he used to say. And we want first class all the way around. Our residents deserve it. They pay their taxes, and that's what they've earned from us. No matter where you live, what your zip code is, then that's the way it should be.
Right. Exactly right. Just to put this into perspective, we had our first homicide Saturday. I think Baltimore recorded its 79th this afternoon. They had a guy shot in the head. The 79 murders since January. We've had one. And so, like you said, the city of Annapolis, whether the residents realize it or not, or some officials realize it or not, we're blessed in comparison. We're not perfect, as you said, Alderwoman, and we have our challenges here in the city of Annapolis. But Lord knows, I'll argue with anybody until the cows come home. We are way ahead of most jurisdictions. We've had body-worn cameras. We have an OEM that does that takes charge of ICS. We have a fire department that the community loves. I'm talking about here in Annapolis. We don't have public officials that bring a lot of baggage to work. Every time you turn around, we don't have to turn on the news and say another city official is under federal investigation. And so you look at other jurisdictions, not just Baltimore, you can look at a lot of other jurisdictions. Every other day, some federal investigation is looking into the dealings of elected public officials. We don't have any of that here. We have a town that takes that's concerned. Even when people disagree with the police department, they care enough about their community, and I respect that. Even if they holler at me and criticize me or my department, they care enough about their community to do that. You have total acrimony in Baltimore. People have just given up hope. And it's a blessing to be a chief of police in a city where residents still at least have hope that things are going to get better. And so I think sometimes, as you've often told me, Chairwoman, that sometimes you have to sit back and appreciate what you do have and celebrate the things that you've done well. You told me a while ago, several months ago, and not take this personally. Only reason why I take it so personally, as I talked to the mayor this morning, because I just want to do a good job. There's no hidden agenda. In the police life, I'm an elder statesman. In the police life, not in general. I'm a 62-year-old police executive. That makes me one of the oldest in Maryland, and I know that for a fact. There's not too many 60-year-old police chiefs. So I'm honored that I have at this stage of my life, that I have the ability to lead a police department and impart any wisdom that I may have to help us make it to the next level. So the next chief that comes behind me will find the police department better off when I left than when I came here. So thank you, Madam Chair, for all the opportunities. Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Chief Simmons. I appreciate you all. Thank you. Thank you, Stan. And thank you, Alderman Payon. Remember, I need my money, sir.
Okay.
As a person who was born in Baltimore City, only was there for a very short period of time when I was born, who went to Morgan State, who went to the University of Maryland downtown, and was there for 20 and a half years there, every day I shudder and I pray for the people in Baltimore, and my children were born there. So I can't, you thank God, for what we have here, and still pray for the ones that are left up there that have to deal with what they're dealing with. It's really a sad situation, and we are appreciative of what we have here in Annapolis. And I know you and Deputy Police Branford can definitely attest to that. It's really a bad situation. So anyway, with that being said, anyone else for the good of the order? Chief Simmons, Chief Romali, Deputy Chief Branford, anything else for the good of the order?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, Alderman Payon, do you have a motion?
Thank you, everybody. And from home, from the dinner table, I move that we adjourn.
I second that. All in favor? Aye. It is